Reputation couldn't be calculated. I could give you 10 on a reputation scale and 8. What does it mean to have a measurement of your reputation?
That, by the way, sounds like perhaps inkling towards a social credit score. Now, I don't know that that's where it's going to go in the conversation, because the next section gets into high finance. They mention the importance of fractional reserve lending, or lending out without the correct number of assets or gold or whatever to back up what's being lent. This is a huge vindication for those of us that have listened to Tragedy and Hope, Carol Quigley, people in the Ron Paul sphere, von Mises sphere, people at the Austrian School of Economics. They've had this critique. This is the central modus operandi of the Federal Reserve System, which is based on the Rothschild banking model. And we have that, by the way, in the biography of the Rothschilds by Morton, which we've been citing this week. And they even admit in the book that the famous Waterloo story of advanced intelligence, which led them to be able to buy up market as it crashed, is the model that Jeff Simon McEvery himself uses for finance now. What's weird is that it's going to go in the direction of questioning scientism. He's going to get into Kabbalah, and he's even going to bring up Leibniz. So it's very pertinent to those of us from the philosophy domain. We're going to talk about the monads, monadology. We're going to try to decipher, does Epstein really know what he's talking about, or is he a pseudo? And I think ultimately it's going to be probably Kabbalistic, because the way that he describes gigantic systems working as organisms also has parallels with the Kabbalistic myth of the golem. So let's get into this interesting, raw, uncut. I guess this is 2 of the hours of the Bannon Epstein interview, which, if I recall, is very long. Isn't there like a whole bunch of these 2-hour things or something? So I don't know exactly how long this goes.
Deep stuff. Let's give some basics, or some things I want to do inquiry from the others. Walk me through the Santa Fe Institute. What was it about the time of the math? And this was in the late 90s. So they're not going to hear me on this part, right? We're going to do it both ways?
It will not be on the video, but we do have you recorded.
Fine. Remember, when you're answering on these questions, I'm not in the shot, and they're never going to hear my voice. So a little bit you got to repeat in your answer, you got to repeat what my question was.
Oh,
a little bit.
Okay.
Santa Fe Institute. Why, when you're at the top of your game on Wall Street, do you decide to finance, which was at the time, or endow, or become the donor or sponsor, however you want to say it, for what was considered the most cutting edge group of mathematicians in the world? Action.
So Santa Fe Institute in the late 80s, early 90s, I was interested, I was on the board of Rockefeller. So that starts, Rockefeller, it's university formed by John D. Rockefeller.
Of course, this is where we get the OSS and the CIA is out of Rockefeller. So he's right up there working at the top levels of finance very early.
Sort of give back to the community. It's east side of Manhattan, except
he's just giving back to the community.
It was old. It was sort of old-fashioned. They were talking about medicine, and medicine by itself was, again, subject to the ideas of science. They were trying to use science to find cures for disease. And I said, no, we need to do something different. We need to start interdisciplinary work.
How did a schmuck like you get on the board of Rockefeller? What year was that?
I don't remember. Late, I think 89 or 91.
So that's one of the most prestigious research places in the world, correct?
Yes.
Okay, how did a guy like you get on the board of a blue blood, internationally known, hard research, Nobel Prize winners all over the place? How do they pick a guy like you, a trader from, or basically some guy from Bear Stearns?
Good question. So I was asked to be on the board of Rockefeller, and I think I was on the board of Rockefeller. There was a money manager who said Rockefeller needs someone with financial expertise because the university is growing and there's lots of new things. You have to, again, we go back to the original discussion the last time. Up until the mid-'80s or sort of early mid-'70s, the most important thing was your name. If you were Rockefeller, you already were considered to be brilliant. If you were head of General Motors, it was your reputation. It was who you knew, who your family was, what was your character. And then in the mid-'70s, basically, if you remember, you probably had a calculator. It was very advanced in those days to have a Texas Instrument calculator, where it could, by putting in the numbers, it would multiply for you to do square roots. And that was the first, and everyone who had a calculator was already advanced on Wall Street. a simple almost like your accountant. The most important parts of business were really now going to calculations. So it's not only mathematics, but it's things that could be calculated. Reputation couldn't be calculated. I could give you, are you a 10 on a reputation scale, an 8? What does it mean to have a measurement of your reputation? We'll get to that later. But places like Rockefeller needed someone to say, look, we're entering a different world where numbers and the numbers of companies, portfolio management was going to be balanced. It was going to be statistical. Jeffrey, could you come on the board, potentially sit on the finance committee, Nancy Kissinger and a bunch of other people. And David Rockefeller and I got along very well. He was this unbelievable human being, respectful to everyone. He introduced his driver.
Well, there's you a very insightful, high-level alliance between the WASP power structure and Jeff Stein McCaffrey, admitted right there from Jeff Stein himself.
As his colleague, not his driver. He would never say, this is my driver. He said, it's my colleague. And David started to explain to me world politics. So David would say, Jeffrey, money is going to be sort of the most important things. People don't understand money. You seem to have this knack for money. I said to David, tell me about your life. What was the worst and the best part of your life? So David said, when I grew up, everyone knew I was a Rockefeller. They didn't know that my father told me he would not leave me a dime, no money. But every time we went out to eat, me and my 5 friends at school, they would leave me the bill. They would expect me to pick up the check because I was a Rockefeller. And he said, I was chairman of Chase Bank. And he said, I remember like it was yesterday, one of the headlines in Time magazine said, David, please fire yourself. So he thought that there was a world that existed that would be a combination of both politics and business and leadership. What do I mean? He formed something called the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral.
Now, we've talked about Trilateral. This was actually created for Henry Kissinger to originally run. And Jeff Stein McCaffrey mentions that he did have a stint at Trilateral. So this was something that, Kissinger and Brzezinski worked together on. And Kissinger set that up under David Rockefeller originally for Brzezinski. And then I guess Jeff Stein had a stint there as well.
Commission is some spooky stuff. People said it was something the Illuminati, there's some mystery about it, people that ran the world. It was politicians, but David said most countries, the politicians get elected for 4 years or 8 years, separate from the royal families in England or in the Middle East. Someone's there for 4 years and then they're not there anymore. The most important people to have stability and consistency would be businessmen. So he formed this Trilateral Commission of businessmen and politicians from 3 major continents. So it was the North Americans, the Europeans, and the Asians. So he said to me, would you like to be on the Trilateral Commission? Now, I was 30 years old, 32 years old. I said, great. And he said, well, you have to fill out this application so they have your bio. And I looked at the list of people, and it was Bill Clinton, former president of the United States, Paul Volcker, every great leader in America, the Asians, the Japanese, and with a very long description of their history. And they asked me to fill in what I would like to have written. And I wrote Jeffrey Epstein, comma, just a good kid, which I thought was funny, nobody else did. So in answer to your question, at that time I recognized around the world that monies and currencies were not really well understood. But again, it was only numbers. So numbers, and I'll get to the fact that it was bad thinking. Numbers are very good.
Are most people that you meet, even on the Trilateral Commission, when you meet most people, do you find most leaders financially illiterate, economically illiterate?
Most political leaders don't come out of a background of finance. Most political leaders come out of a background of being popular.
Yeah, and this is what's interesting is that even some of the elite finance people like Larry Summers, right? They are instructed on things like the Vatican Bank by Jeffrey. Jeffrey has the whole email explaining to Larry Summers how the Vatican Bank works, which is wild because, of course, that again is another thing implicating the Vatican. Curtis Jackson, $5. Knowing what you know, how does it all shake? Does this shake you up at all? Sometimes it feels very defeating. I think that after many, many years of researching this stuff, you kind of just have an immunity to it. I mean, it's awful, but I first learned this stuff in the 90s, you know what I mean? So I was upset, and then I remember reading a lot on sort of occult ritual crime stuff in the early 2000s. The first ritual abuse book I read was in 2003. And it was William Kennedy's book on that in the Roman Catholic Church, who himself was a traditional Catholic, writing to expose it. So, I learned about that back in 2003. So I guess I'm just so sort of long in the discourse that it is bad, but it doesn't shock me or make me feel bad anymore.
So in some of the countries, in some of the African countries, for example, they might have been a military person. They were a general. In some of the African countries, they might have been a disc jockey. Or in our country, they would have been an actor. The knowledge of money they don't have expertise, they have no degrees in finance. They really, and this is one of the major problems, their expertise, if they have any financial knowledge, is of their own checking account or bank account and filling in their own taxes. So many world leaders who don't really have a financial underpinning make fundamental errors when it comes to money on a country or institutional level. Let me give you an example. If you, Mr. Bannon, if I said your assets increased last year, you'd say, that sounds pretty good. And I'd say, what does that mean to you? You'd say, well, I have more money. I guess I'm wealthier. I'd say yes. And if your debt increased, would you feel wealthier or poorer? You'd say, well, I don't want to have increased debt. I don't like the idea of that sound, increased debt. Now, that and world leaders understand when their assets go up, they feel better. However, institutions like banks, things that people don't really understand are financial underpinnings of banks. When I say your bank, Mr. Bannon, you have the Bannon Bank, you doubled your assets. Sounds good, but what does it really mean? It means people owe you more money. You don't have any more money. What? Yeah. A bank's assets are how much it is owed by other people. That's crazy. So if the bank goes from $2 billion of assets to $10 billion, it means people owe it an additional $8 billion, but their assets have gone up. So the terminology of assets and liabilities is different for banks. It's not natural. And what most people, and you ask questions about world leaders, there's many people, I think your old boss Mercer understood, there's a fundamental part of money which is called fractionalized banking. And fractionalized banking is something that finance people understand and the people on the street.
Fractional reserve banking. That is the classic critique that you get from all the Austrian economists, Ron Paul, von Mises, everybody criticizing that method of scamming the public through lending out and debasing the currency on reserves that you don't have. So that vindicates the whole critique of the Federal Reserve. And here is Epstein basically admitting that in this shocking statement.
When I say people on the street, that's where I was when I started on Wall Street, would find it impossible to believe. Impossible. Why? Bannon Bank, I give you $1, just one single dollar. In our system of banking, I would say, okay, Steve, I gave you $1. How much could you lend out to your friends? And your natural reaction would be probably something less than $1 because I want to keep something in my pocket. The way our system works is if you as a bank are holding my dollar, you can lend out an additional $8 or $9. No, it's impossible. I only have $1, Jeffrey. We have something called fractionalized reserves, which is if you have 1, you can lend out 9. That's the way our system works. And so not only do world leaders not understand banking, but the man on the street, my father who worked in the park department, it would be beyond his imagination that people could lend out more money than they actually had in their pocket. Next question.
Wait, how did this...
Total vindication. We've done so many talks on the history of fractional reserve banking, on the scam economic system that we live in. That's why things like Bitcoin are the answer to that. And here you have him basically saying everything that's in, for example, the first 200 pages of Tragedy and Hope. That's why we've been pushing and lecturing through Tragedy and Hope for so many years. We have over a decade ago, we lectured through 1,300 pages of Tragedy and Hope. And the first 300 pages are the scam economic system that Quigley calls attention to. Here's Jeff Simon McCaffrey admitting all of that, and that's what he was brought in to help understand and to explain and to master. So as I said, as I've been pointing out, he's like a PhD in organized crime.
In understanding that, when you get on something like the Trilateral Commission, you're on the board at Rockefeller, which is the most advanced research. You get brought into the Trilateral, which is the elite of the elite. How, since you're only at that time
30-something.
8 years from teaching at Dalton, right? You're a Dalton.
No, 10 years.
10 years teaching at Dalton.
Yes.
Walk us through. I mean, put us in the room. Walk me through exactly what it felt like. What it felt like being on the board at Rockefeller. We got these Nobel laureates, and you're sitting there making decisions, and you start to meet these people at Rockefeller. Now you start to meet these people at the Trilateral Commission. What did it feel like?
It's a great question. So what did it feel
That's
like?
what I'm in the business of asking.
Yeah. What did it feel like meeting some of these people like Kissinger or Rockefeller? And those were two extraordinary people. But in general, I think the question, the people on Wall Street, I tell the story, the first day, one of the first days when I was in Wall Street, someone said to me, would you like to buy ATV? And I was looking in the brochure and I couldn't figure out what stock had a symbol of ATV. And when I finally said, well, I can't find it. And they said, what's the matter with you? Do you want to buy ATV? Which is, he was selling hot televisions, stolen televisions from the floor of the American Stock Exchange, referred to in common parlance as the televisions fell off the truck.
So this is just a little interesting tidbit that the stock exchange was so corrupt that people were selling, according to him, stolen TVs on the floor of the stock exchange. That's kind of wild.
So I knew what that phrase meant from Coney Island. But what I found was most people, be it in business, in normal life, or in the world leaders, don't really understand money. It is something they think about. They have a sense of what it is. They certainly want more of it. But they also make statements like, we want more money, but we don't want more debt, which just shows a misunderstanding of what money at its core really is. So most people don't, they want to make it, they want to save it, but to understand it intimately is not a normal characteristic.
At the first Trilateral
All right. Looks like it
or something.
bleeps out for a second.
Yeah, good. You're good.
Just give me approximate. You joined the Trilateral
I
Commission.
think it might be 90.
And we'll be able to show we'll pull down the chart of where your name was, but just give me roughly when it was.
I think it could be 90. I don't remember.
Okay. Let's say early 90s.
Yes.
When you got on the Trilateral Commission and had the first, do you remember where the first meeting was?
It was in Tokyo.
In Tokyo. And at what hotel?
I would like to say the Hilton, but it's probably not.
And it's a 3-day, 4-day? Give me some
Three-day event, and
walk me through the whole thing.
Speeches.
It starts with a dinner. Just walk me through it.
It was boring.
You couldn't possibly think it was boring. It's
It
bullshit.
was boring.
You had to
No,
be stars
sorry.
in your eyes.
No.
Did you fly over privately?
Yes, but it wasn't my plane.
So it didn't count?
No.
You fly over.
Yes.
And
it was
who were the first, like when you first met those leaders, you had to be wowed.
No.
You're 10 years out of Coney Island.
No, I'm not wowed by people of position. I'm wowed by people of great ideas. And I don't care if it's the bus driver. I don't care if it's the student I had who has teeth coming out in
Well,
every
these guys
direction.
have to have great ideas. They're the leaders of the 3 great continents of the world: North America, Europe, and Japan.
No, many of these world leaders become world leaders because they're popular and they were able to get votes or they were able to convince people.
I mean, it's kind of a silly question. Does Bannon not know? Come on, Bannon knows that you don't become a leader because you're intelligent. Like, that's not why people become prime ministers. And it's not even ultimately because you're popular. It's because you're psychopathic and you're compromised, most likely.
To vote for them. I learned later. Many of them were just good at what they did in terms of politics. Remember, world leaders are politicians in general. They're not scientists, they're not intellectuals, they're not great thinkers, they're great politicians.
At the first Trilateral Commission meeting that you remember in Tokyo, sometime in the early 90s, do you remember what were the big issues of the day that they were talking about, and what did you think about it?
Yeah, in fact, it was funny because they were talking about inflation. And they were worried that what would happen, how do you control inflation? And as a mathematician, I didn't understand the concept. I don't understand the concept today. How's that possible? Well, when you talk about most things to do with money, money is meant to be local. It's US dollars. Then I understand what it means. If inflation, it means my dollar today inflates, and it doesn't buy as much as it did a couple.
Why he's such a is Epstein is a conspiracy theorist. Jeff Stein McGeffrey is a Ron Paul level conspiracy theorist talking about the Federal Reserve and inflation. Again, vindicated, dog.
Of years ago, the prices go up. I don't have. It seems that everything is great, but in fact, my dollar is shrinking in value.
If you and you're the financial genius here. I'm just a lowly M&A guy.
If you let me finish the thought.
Go ahead.
So if you're in America, you can feel inflation. Your salary's gone up, but you can't buy the same car. In fact, it starts to feel weird because the value.
That's why I wanted to ask the question. This is my point.
Sure.
The people who live and breathe this, the central banks, have been haunted by the specter of inflation since the late 70s.
Yes.
First off, tell our audience, how did that happen? The two great financial events in the 20th century, I'm not going to get to the 21st, were the great inflation in Europe after World War I, the Great Depression, the hyperinflation in Germany that led to the rise of Hitler, and then this inflation in the mid-70s. Before you go to explain inflation, why is this specter of inflation always the central thing in central bankers' minds?
Because it goes back to the first concept I said, the weird concept of fractionalized reserves. The system is not well understood. And most systems, in fact, are not well understood. We don't know how our digestive system.
Stop. This is impossible. This is impossible.
This is interesting too, because the discussion is going to go into the domain of systems, and do systems kind of work like a holistic organism or like a holon in some of the literature? If you read Arthur Kessler, one of the global elites, we've lectured through his book. Friedhof Kopper's book on the global elites also talks about holons, and this idea that you don't just have discrete individual things, you also have the individuals making up a holistic collective entity, an organism. And so he will go into talking about how he thinks that the economy perhaps operates like a gigantic living organism, or some sort of a holon. And that, by the way, also is a Kabbalistic idea, because you have this notion of the golem. The golem is not alive, but it can be made alive. It's a soulless sort of a mechanical monstrosity or being that you can kind of manipulate or make it to do your will. If you read Jacques Attali's Global Elite text, Brief History of the Future, which we've lectured through, he talks about how in the future, when everybody's linked into the global brain, it will be a golem. So he calls this holon collective system of all the minds linked into the global Skynet or whatever. He also refers that to that explicitly as the golem. And I think Epstein is going in that direction because he's going to describe a mathematical based reality, a kind of a Kabbalistic idea that reality is gematria or mathematics itself, to Bannon, and Bannon will kind of be mystified as to what he's talking about. But that's why he cites Leibniz. And Leibniz, of course, wasn't Jewish, but Leibniz was influenced by, with his monadology, the philosophy and the esoteric ideas of the Kabbalah. And so was Hegel as well.
The world banking system, the world currency system, the world monetary system
Yes.
has to be so well understood by the Greenspans of the world and the Bernankes of the world and you, right? The currency traders, the guys making billion-dollar bets every day, the legendary guy on Wall Street in the late 90s, Vassalin Brothers.
Lou Ranieri?
No, the guy that wrote the money.
Michael Lewis? Liar's Poker?
Yeah, Liar's Poker. Who's that about? That great trader.
Lou Ranieri.
No, it wasn't the guy that ran the desk. That eventually ran the hedge fund that went long-term capital.
Yes, I don't remember.
Who's the guy?
I want to say, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Lunar is big, but
Yes.
those guys have to understand the system perfectly.
No, they don't understand the system. They understand the local part of the system. So, for example, why is not only inflation, most bankers are terrified if the public understood that the bank really doesn't have their money at any one time. It's one of the things during the Depression, there were runs on the bank.
Well, this is interesting because banks don't actually have what backs up the currency or the money. This is the fractional reserve banking, right? The banks can immediately double the amount. If they give you a loan, they also put on their balance sheet that same amount. So this is fractional reserve banking. This is the ability to create money out of thin air and then draw interest on the made up money. That's the whole system.
The reason the banks don't keep much money in the actual bank is they assume that not everyone's going to want their money on the same day. So it's not really the fear of inflation. The fear is a run on the bank. Everybody wants to take out something that doesn't really exist. Inflation is tied to interest rates. It's a more complicated example. But when your
All right,
money...
so he's just kind of saying a lot of the same stuff here. Let's skip ahead to see if we get to something a little more interesting than just babbling about the same fiat stuff.
Systems, they're called neural nets.
All right, so now he's getting into systems analysis, and that's a little more interesting.
The strangest thing that they found, one of the strangest things, is that the systems that they design, this artificial intelligence, which a lot of people have heard about, is they design a bunch of systems. They're called neural nets. The term simply taken out of brain work, neurons in the brain. Nets because they actually look like a net. They put in some inputs. The computers work, spit out an answer. Sounds normal to you. It's because you're thinking about that calculator you had in 1976 on your desk. When you ask the person who designed the system, how did it come to that answer? How did your neural net, can you show me the calculations? They say, no, we don't know. We don't know how the thing we designed actually came up with that answer. That's pretty strange. They take the same neural net now and they put it in front of a video game. No learning, nothing. They said, to the computer, they say, sit in front of your video game and learn how to play. It seems the computer learns better than any human in history, faster than any human in history, beats any human in history, but when you ask the designer how did it do it, no one knows. It just did it. So that's the first little touch.
All right, so they're talking about, and he's getting into a little bit of AI there. So let's go over to Jeff Stein. Real quick recap of the first 20 minutes, which was really revealing because Jeff Stein says that he was recruited into Trilateral by David Rockefeller, and he mentions the Kissinger family. He mentions, I don't think he mentions Brzezinski, but originally Kissinger created the Trilateral Commission under David Rockefeller as a steering committee specifically for Brzezinski. So let's listen to this recap of that.
The finance, which was at the time, or endow, or become the donor or sponsor, however you want to say it, for what was considered the most cutting edge group of math.
It's going to get a little technical and dry, but it's relevant because not only does it talk about like global elite stuff, he also gets into the domain of geopolitics and metaphysics. So he's going to get into the relationship between mysticism and technology, Kabbalistic elements, etc.
Mathematicians in the world. Action.
So Santa Fe Institute in the late 80s, early 90s, I was interested, I was on the board of Rockefeller. So that starts, Rockefeller, it's university formed by John D. Rockefeller to sort of give back to the community. It's east side of Manhattan, except it was old. It was sort of old-fashioned. They were talking about medicine, and medicine by itself was, again, subject to the ideas of science. They were trying to use science to find cures for disease. And I said, no, we need to do something different. We need to start interdisciplinary work. In most...
How did a schmuck like you get on the board of Rockefeller? What year was that?
I don't remember. Late, I think 89 or 91.
So that's one of the most prestigious research places in the world, correct?
Yes.
Okay, how did a guy like you get on the board of a blue blood, internationally known, hard research, Nobel Prize winners all over the place? How do they pick a guy like you, a trader from, or basically some guy from Bear Stearns?
Good question. So I was asked to be on the board of Rockefeller, and I think it was, I was on the board of Rockefeller, there was a money manager who said, Rockefeller needs someone with financial expertise because the university is growing and there's lots of new things. You have to, again, we go back to the original discussion the last time. Up until the mid-'80s or sort of early mid-'70s, the most important thing was your name. If you were Rockefeller, you already were considered to be brilliant. If you were head of General Motors, it was your reputation, it was who you knew. who your family was, what was your character. And then in the mid-70s, basically,
I'm really glad that Jeff Stein McGeffrey understands the importance of character and virtue ethics. I wouldn't have thought him to be so sensitive and mindful of those topics, but it's good to know that the global elite care very much about having good character. So that's good news.
if you remember, you probably had a calculator. It was very advanced in those days to have a Texas Instrument calculator, where it could, by putting in the numbers, it would multiply for you to do square roots. And that was the first, and everyone who had a calculator was already advanced on Wall Street. A simple almost like your accountant. The most important parts of business were really now going to calculate.
I like the idea of a Woody Allen, Jeffrey Epstein calculator that like fixes the numbers and fixes the books for you. It's automatically programmed in the end to fix the books.
Relations. So it's not only mathematics, but it's things that could be calculated. Reputation couldn't be calculated. I could give you, are you a 10 on a reputation scale, an 8? What does it mean to have a measurement of your reputation? We'll get to that later. But people, places.
That, by the way, sounds like perhaps inklings towards a social credit score. Now, I don't know that that's where it's going to go in the conversation, because the next section gets into high finance. And when they talk about high finance, as you guys know, they mention the importance of fractional reserve lending, or lending out without the correct number of assets or gold or whatever to back up what's being lent out. And this is a huge vindication for those of us that have listened to Tragedy and Hope, Carol Quigley, people in the Ron Paul sphere, von Mises sphere, people at the Austrian School of Economics. They've had this critique. Remember Creature from Jekyll Island, right? For many, many years. This is the central modus operandi of the Federal Reserve System, which is based on the Rothschild banking model. And we have that, by the way, in the biography of the Rothschilds by Morton, which we've been citing this week. And they even admit in the book, as I put on my Twitter, that the Waterloo story, the famous Waterloo story of advanced intelligence, which led them to be able to buy up the market as it crashed, is the model that Jeff Stein McGeffrey himself uses for finance now. So a lot of admissions, key points. And what's weird is that it's going to go in the direction of questioning scientism. He's going to get into Kabbalah, and he's even going to bring up Leibniz. And that was the last thing I would have expected to be in a Bannon Epstein interview, is the discussion of Leibniz. So it's very pertinent to those of us from the philosophy domain. We're going to talk about the monads, monadology. We're going to try to decipher, does Epstein really know what he's talking about, or is he a pseudo? And I think ultimately it's going to be probably Kabbalistic, because the way that he describes gigantic systems working as organisms also has parallels with the Kabbalistic myth of the golem. So we're gonna be focusing on Kabbalism and all that as we get into Jeff Stein McGeffrey's interview. We're gonna skip ahead to where we left off, which was about 20 minutes in, after he explained to Bannon fractional reserve banking. And again, it's kind of surprising to me. Bannon doesn't get it. Like, he's not aware of what, like, everybody from the Ron Paul sphere, right? Everybody from this side of things knows what fractional reserve banking is, and how the bankers use the gold note scam, and they would print more gold notes than they had actual gold. You know, Quigley says this within the first 200 pages of Tragedy and Hope, and it goes back centuries, and ultimately it goes back millennia. So this is an old trick of devaluing the currency. That's basically what Epstein is talking about. And he says more or less that the way that he got recruited into this high-level trilateral steering committee stuff was because he was able to explain high finance and fractional reserve banking to these people, which you would think they would understand, but they didn't.
Sure. You understand your body system. You'd say, well, I hope so, because I want them to keep me healthy. But you could have a kidney infection, you could have a heart attack, you could have a broken knee. There's lots of pieces of this system. And in fact, when you ask the question, very few doctors understand your entire body. There's a special.
And we're going to fast forward to that part where he talks about systems analysis. So basically, he's looking at holistic systems. And some of the global elite writers, whether it's Arthur Kessler or Friedrich Schuon, they talk about what's called holons, H-O-L-O-N. So they point out that when you have things in nature like root systems or cells or whatever in the body, they don't operate as independent, discrete units. They actually function together within a whole organism. And that's sometimes called a holon. That's what he's talking about, which is very important to the global elite, because for one, they like to focus not just on the discrete parts, but controlling and steering at a big macro scale. And that would be, say, macro finance, macro sociology, right? Like how a whole country interrelates, right? You could see why for the global elite, big scale macro stuff would be very important.
Specialist for your knee, there's a specialist for your polynoidal cyst, there's a specialist for your head, and now we have specialists in different areas. So and I'm going to get to your first question about Santa Fe Institute. The world economy and your body are both comprised of little systems interacting with each other and making one big system.
This, by the way, if you saw our Ghost in the Machine analysis of the famous Arthur Kessler text, he was a high-level global elite player, kind of like Jeff St. McEvery to a degree. That's all the first half of that book is this, what he's talking about.
This is what's stunning for all the little guys out there, the populist movement, the little guys that haven't had a pay raise in 30 years. They think that these elites, have everything. They're the guys in the room making the decisions. They're the party of Davos guys. You're sitting there, and you don't think many people today really understand the complexity and really all the moving pieces and how they interconnect to the world's financial system.
No, not only don't they understand the complexity, and that goes back to Santa Fe Institute was an attempt of trying to see if there was a way to mathematize, formularize, or algorithmically understand what the term complexity means. That goes back to the original question. Complex systems are complex by definition, but it's not one level of complexity. We might say, well, our fingers are complex, the movements, the muscles of our hands, but it's not as complex as the blood system. Now I have a circulatory system. I have systems on top of systems, so that there's no one group of or person that really understands the way the body works. There's no one group that understands the way the financial systems work. You might understand U.S. bond markets. Now, you asked about the trade of long-term capital. That was a bond fund. Very small part of this very complex system. So the goal of the Santa Fe Institute was to see, is there a way to somehow understand how complex systems interact?
Now, this is really important because it gives us an insight into what he was up to and what his role seems to be. And if you've heard my analysis all week long as we've gone through the Epstein files as they released, that was essentially what I said I thought he was. He's a high-level integrator and systems analysis networker. He seems to kind of almost have maybe a PhD in organized crime over all the other things that he's purported to be, like a mathematician or a banker or a money manager, right? I mean, he was probably doing those things to some degree, but his real role is as an operative to do systems analysis and explain to even high-level people how the world actually works. So he's kind of an educator as well, a consultant, you could say. That's why, for example, Zelensky says, I need to consult Epstein, I need his help in regard to what's happening in the Ukraine versus Russia. That's why he explains for several minutes to Ehud Barak what Peter Thiel's company is and what Palantir does, right? So he's doing this. He's even explaining to Clinton's own economic team, Larry Summers, how the Vatican Bank works as a super secret money laundering international operation, right? He has to explain that to them. And he's having to explain to Bannon, a journalist, what fractional reserve banking is and how the world actually functions in this same way as a controlled, organized crime black market system. That's what he's getting at. He's saying, I understood this, and that was my role. Now, people are saying, oh, he's actually dumb. He's not that smart. Now, he's also a con man, so he has elements of trying to present himself as overcompetent in other domains like science or philosophy, right? So it's going to be interesting to see as philosophers, when we get to his section talking about monads and Leibniz, does he really understand what he's talking about? Or is there a lot of word salad terminology going on to make it look like he's way more overcompetent, that he's some kind of savant? I think even Bannon asked him at one point something like that, like, are you some sort of savant? Like, what are you?
Fast forward, Steve, to today, where Google and these other engine companies, the other tech companies, are trying to build artificial intelligence. The strangest thing that they found, one of the strangest things, is that the systems that they design, this artificial intelligence, which a lot of people have heard about, is they design a bunch of systems. They're called neural nets. The term simply taken out of brain work, neurons in the brain. Nets because they actually look like a net. They put in some inputs. The computers work, spit out an answer. Sounds normal to you. It's because you're thinking about that calculator you had in 1976 on your desk. When you ask the person who designed the system, how did it come to that answer? How did your neural net, can you show me the calculations? They say, no, we don't know. We don't know how the thing we designed actually came up with that answer. That's pretty.
Now, to the people in the comments are saying, what do you mean he's a student of crime? No, there actually are people who get really advanced information and studies about how to do crime. In fact, in the Brazilian car wash scandal, there was a guy called the Sicilian who was basically a PhD in how to do criminal organization or criminal crime syndicate type stuff. So my suspicion, I'm not saying there's like a literal like villain school, right? I'm not talking about Marvel shit. I'm saying like there really is a place for people who have a very high level understanding of black markets and criminal organizations. Now, a lot of those people work in intelligence agencies because that's what intelligence agencies do, is they place people in other countries. I mean, it's one of the things they do. They also lie through the media all the time, but one of their jobs is to place people in other countries to do illegal activities. So by definition, an intelligence agency engaging in espionage is a criminal organization. So keep that in mind.
Strange. They take the same neural net now and they put it in front of a video game. No learning, nothing. They say to the computer, they say, sit in front of your video game and learn how to play. It seems the computer learns better than any human in history, faster than any human in history, beats any human in history. But when you ask the designer how did it do it, no one knows. It just did it. So that's the first little touch of things that we already have gotten to a place where we don't understand it, and we built it.
On Sunday afternoon, September 14th, 2008, where were you?
Sorry?
It was the night they put Lehman Brothers in bankruptcy in London.
I was in jail.
Seriously?
Yes.
So the financial crisis of 2008 happened when you were in jail?
Yes.
Oh, this is going to be so amazing. This is going to be so amazing. I take it you didn't have your Wall Street Journal dropped off to you in the morning, your Financial Times?
No.
How did you hear about that? How did you hear about, because I want
I forgot.
No, this is interesting just because when he was first brought into being on Wall Street, when he was at Bear Stearns, his partner, Hoffman or Hofstadt or something, his partner went to jail and he didn't for insider trading. So he was learning the criminal syndicates even that early on, operations, insider trading. And it's curious that he didn't get in trouble, but his partner did.
About this, but yes.
I'm trying to get this going to be amazing. This is, let's go back and do that again.
But that was back in the 80s, by the way. That was a long time ago.
Sunday afternoon, because I want to find out about people, the geniuses understanding the complexity of the financial system. Because I think the best example we have is the financial crisis, the crash of 2008.
Yeah, people are asking, well, what about Bannon? Does Bannon... Well, I think what I gather from the interview is that, and Bannon just said it right here, he's like, I want to know and talk to all the geniuses in the world. And when I read the text, Bannon seems to think of Epstein as like this super savant, right? Like this amazing genius person. And he doesn't really seem to catch on to any of the suitery. But I think, again, as far as I can tell, Epstein's expertise is really just criminal operations. And Bannon doesn't seem to be swift enough to pick up on the kind of limitations, I guess, of the other domains. He thinks he's just a sort of like polymath or something.
Sunday afternoon, September 14th, I think it was, 2008, is when they were working feverishly in Midtown Manhattan at the Lehman Brothers offices and in various law firms around town, and with the Secretary of Treasury in the Federal Reserve, what they're going to do with Lehman. They decided they weren't going to save it. And so they prepared to put it into bankruptcy at the open of the market in London the next day. How did you hear about what was going to happen to Lehman Brothers, and what did you immediately think when you heard they was going to be put into bankruptcy?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was in solitary confinement September 14th. And again, some of the public stories about the wonderful time I had in jail and of my work release, which didn't come until months after. I'd been there since June, in an 8x10 cell with a bed in the back, a 6-foot bed in the back, a chrome sink with a toilet attached to it, and a little piece of metal sticking out that was supposed to act as a table. Now, since I was in jail, there were no books. Why? There's no library. No library, but you're in jail. No, I was in jail, not prison. So in jail, I was in a place which was called the Special Housing Unit, which is for the roughest, toughest, meanest people. They had put me there, they said, for my own protection. So I was in an 8x10 cell with a little slit in the door where they would serve my food on a tray about 9 inches by 4 inches. And then as soon as I finished eating, they would take the tray and close it down. And one of the guards said, do you understand there's Wall Street's crashing. I'm worried about my pension fund. What should I do? And I said, sorry, Wall Street's crashing? What's happened? And he said, there's some crisis and some companies are going bankrupt. I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah, it's all over the papers. We're all terrified. We're going to lose our life savings because we have either a 401k or our pension funds. We don't know anything about money. Mr. Epstein, can you tell us, like, what's going on? Am I going to be able to afford my children's education? Am I going to be bankrupt like this company called Lehman Brothers? And there's another company on the front page today called Bear Stearns. Oh, no, I said. Why? Because that's the company I was a partner in. And in fact, that was a company I had a very large investment in. So, as a great story, I didn't have my Wall Street Journal, but in the early mornings, you're allowed to make 2 phone calls, collect. And when you pick up the phone, You can dial a number, and when the person picks up, they say, you're getting a call from the Palm Beach County Jail. Will you accept reverse charges? And the person either says yes, and the call goes through, or the person says no. The person I called was Jimmy Kane, the president of Bear Stearns. And I said, tell me what's going on. And so that my knowledge of the financial crisis happened with Jimmy, who was at the center of the storm, telling me about what Lehman had gone under, and they were trying to figure out a way, should they bail out Bear Stearns?
Did it strike you at the time of the mess you had made of your life to be in a situation that you're one of the greatest financial minds in the world looked at?
So Bannon thinks he's the greatest financial mind in the world. So Big Boss says for $5, hey, people who get locked up will tell you that jail is actually a community college for criminals to study, and prison is the university. Yes, I have heard that. And of course, we talked to Sean Atwood, who, lived through that for many years. He was involved in a massive ecstasy ring being busted in Arizona, and he was competing with Sammy the Bull. And of course, Sammy will say similar things as well. I think though with Epstein, what you have though is above that. This is above that kind of level of, learning to run a local gang. This is like I mean, some of those files the first day, it was like Epstein was organizing meetings with literally like 20 heads of state of the world he was going to go meet with. I mean, this is a level above that, Big Boss, but you're absolutely right in terms of like the low, local level criminal stuff. That's exactly what it is.
By world leaders and ask their, your thinking by the most prominent and important people in the world. And here you are in solitary confinement. You got to make a collect call to somebody. Did it strike you at the time how all the threads of your life had come together and put you in a position, or you had put yourself in that position?
No.
So it never struck you when you had to make a collect, one of your 50% of your collect calls that day, you call the president or the head of the CEO of Bear Stearns. The biggest financial event in your life is taking place, of which one, every important person in the world would be seeking your opinion. Number two would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to apply your craft. Number three, it would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make money if you were smart, and obviously you're smart. You're telling me here, truthfully, that it never hit you at all of how you'd ended up in a place where you had to make a collect phone call from a jail cell that was 6 by 9 with
Okay,
a steel
Bannon,
bed
come on.
and your food being passed into a slot.
The question you want to ask is, who was the other call to?
Who was the other call to?
The other call was to my friend at J.P. Morgan, who was then, I didn't know at the time, trying to buy Bear Stearns. So at one point, I had two phones. It was difficult because they're afraid people are going to hang themselves with the phone cord. So they don't actually come together and they're pretty short. So I was actually going between two phones talking to Bear Stearns and J.P. Morgan at the same time. So I found it amusing.
And it never struck you?
Well, that's interesting that he references hanging themselves in jail and you can't have phone cords, given the fact that, as we saw with the Sammy the Bull interview, Sammy said, I was in that same Supermax. It's all bullshit. There's no way. Don't let you have nothing. That you can't hang yourself. It's not possible.
About how to end up in a situation like this?
No, that would be probably means I would be too self-aware.
You can't possibly expect me to believe this.
I know. I don't believe it.
You're telling me that during that day, you never had a moment. You sat there and go, what the fuck have I done with my life? I'm in a 6 by 9 jail cell when I should be on a trading desk, or I should be in my $250 million the greatest townhouse in New York City, taking calls from the king of Saudi Arabia, the president of China, the head of Russia, the president of the United States, to save the world's population from a financial debacle. You honestly expect me to believe that never happened?
You're suggesting
Like he would save the world? Dude, in the emails, he's the one talking to Ariana de Rothschild saying, we're going to profit from the collapse of the Ukraine. We're going to go into Somalia, profit from the chaos there. Give me a break.
I was somewhat depressed, and how could this happen to me?
I'm not saying depressed. I'm saying a moment of awareness of how could I get myself into this situation.
No, I would just say how strange that this happens. It's strange. I'm wearing a jumpsuit and flip-flops.
What color was the jumpsuit?
Brown.
Brown jumpsuit.
Yes.
I notice I don't see you in a lot of brown.
No.
Brown jumpsuit and flip-flops.
Flip-flops, yes.
With no access to books, no access to newspapers,
No access to anything.
You had lived on information.
Except my Almond Joy bars. I had extra Almond Joy bars.
Did you eat Almond Joy bars and things like that because you're afraid of what the cooks did to your food?
Yes.
Is that because of that you were in for the crimes that you were in for?
No.
He only ate Almond Joy bars because he was afraid he was going to get poisoned. I mean, they could theoretically poison an Almond Joy bar too, but I mean, okay, whatever.
It was just in fact, I was.
Is it because you're wealthy?
Yes.
How did you know that?
Well, people would constantly come if I was passing by or I'd have to go for my medical. People would either ask to borrow money or make some other types of comments about.
In
the beginning,
what were the comments? At the beginning, what were the comments?
It serves you fucking rich guys right that you're here next to me.
There was nothing about your crimes.
No.
So all this rumor you hear all the time about people in prison that commit the type of crimes you commit, you're saying in your personal thing is not true.
No.
It was all because you were rich.
Yes.
And it was all because they wanted to borrow money.
Or get advice.
Now, we should say, so people that are not aware, I'm pretty sure this Bannon interview is from 2017 or 18. So this is an older interview. This is not new. And people are saying, why is it out now? I think this was in the Epstein files. So I remember hearing this is like several segments of 2 hours. It's something like 6 or 8 hours of the total interview. But this is, for whatever reason, 2 hours of the interview within the Epstein files. So this was probably cataloged, at some point in regard to the trials and to see what he would admit or say in these interviews. I don't think this is being released because it's all a conspiracy. And maybe. A lot of people are theorizing why, but no, this is not new. People are saying, this is a new interview, so he's still alive. No, this is an old interview. It's well known that Bannon had done this, and for whatever reason, it was never released. It's not AI. The other thing I wanted to say too is, I'm trying to go fast because I know it's going to take forever. So I've got it on 1.5. That's why it's sped up a little bit.
Yes.
Wait, they get advice to go long.
Yeah,
You're telling me
is this time to buy?
You're telling me in solitary confinement, they're
Oh, I remember what it was. The other thing was, remember too that I think a lot of what Jeffrey's saying is true and verifiable. For example, he was a council a CFR Trilateral member, so that's not fake. A lot of these things you can go easily verify. But sometimes you can tell, yeah, he is lying. For example, at one point in the interview, he will say that there's no connection between race and IQ. Well, that's totally contrary to what he says in his private DMs and chats. So remember, this is the public face, Jeffrey Epstein, and what he wants people to see. And I think there was even an exchange between him and Bannon, one of the DMs or IMs. He was saying something like, yeah, we need to rebrand you as a philanthropist. I think he said something like that.
interested in going long.
Yeah. They wanted to know
What does that say
stocks-
about human nature?
Well, what I think that people find, one of the reasons they wanted to keep me in solitary confinement was they were afraid that everybody would want to know which stocks to buy. But what happened was, after this crisis, now it's on the front page of every...
Yeah, right. The only reason that they put him in solitary confinement isn't because people had suspicions that he was part of an international, global, elite, Blofeld, Spectre, Bond villain level scheme. It's because people wanted insider information, sure. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to lose this day.
Sorry.
When you first heard that, was it Bear Stearns had been kicked into bankruptcy, 6 months before?
No, it's the same time. This is part of the same deal.
I thought, no, Bear Stearns, they saved Bear Stearns and didn't save Lehman Brothers. That's
right,
6 months before they had bailed out Bear Stearns. But Bear Stearns was still a zombie.
A shell of its former self.
A former self. But they had, quote unquote, saved it. Why did they make the decision in your mind? Why did Hank Paulson and Bernanke, what's this concept of moral hazard? Explain to the audience what moral hazard is, and why did they save Bear Stearns 6 months before, and why did the smartest guys in the room decide not to save Lehman Brothers?
It's a good question. The real issue is I'd have to go back, when you have these systems, to the way your doctor responds to any type of emergency in your body. If they might decide to save your kidneys and let your gallbladder go because the gallbladder is less important to your overall system. If at that time, even it's not that long ago, the boogeyman was when said, well, what really happened? Jeffrey, what really happened? What is this financial crisis? And, some of the progressives and the right wing blame it on the banks. It was the banks' fault. And it's the fault of this very esoteric, unknown concept of derivatives. It was really the derivatives that caused this financial crisis because the derivatives got somehow...
And that's true because they were betting with other people's money. Exactly what happened in Operation Gladio when the Banco d'Ambrosio fell apart and the Vatican Bank was bankrupted is because these criminals were taking the pension funds and betting at really high leverage. So that's what he's referring to, and that is partially correct. Now, nobody was saying it's just the existence of derivatives. It's the criminals using other people's money and then getting bailed out. That's the crime here. And as Big Boss says for $5, this world has fallen when the criminals are classist. You move bricks, I move regimes. We are not the same. Exactly. So again, he's kind of giving more interesting insider sort of information here that, well, yeah, technically it's not derivatives themselves. It's the criminals using these financial instruments at very high leverage to bet. And then when they go bankrupt, they can use the compromised politicians to bail them out with the public's money and taxes and all that. So absolutely, that's what's going on. And again, it's the same model that you see if you study the Brazilian car wash scandal, if you study the FTX collapse, if you study Banco d'Ambrosio and the Vatican Bank collapse and bankrupting, same model, and they just repeat the same sort of criminal techniques over and over.
Out of control and like in the Mickey Mouse.
And that was the way you started your road to a billionaire went right through derivatives.
Yes, but derivatives were not the cause. The derivatives were not the cause at all. It's like saying your hair was the cause of your heart attack because it was on top of your head.
So what
when you
was the
fell down.
cause?
There isn't. Let me say, there's no one specific cause. These are system collapses. So many times when they have to make your death certificate, when you say,
Yeah, there's not one cause. It's an entire criminal organization and criminal syndicate operation that collapses. So yeah, technically, I guess that's true, right?
well, what did he die from? They'll say heart failure. But if you say, what was the cause of his heart failure? Well, he had low blood pressure, his sugar was high, he was diabetic, he had all these other problems. But they say, no, we need a word on your death certificate. Did he die from brain damage? Did he die from heart failure? That's the financial crisis. People said, well, what caused it? They wrote, like on its death certificate, derivatives.
Now remember, there's exchanges between him and Bannon in the emails where he says he has to explain to Bannon, inflation and the Federal Reserve are weapons. That's what's really going on. Now remember, this is the public interview, right? So this is Epstein's public face, full of admissions, but also there's the private communication, what Epstein really thinks, and that's why that's way more interesting than this. Although this is very relevant and interesting.
But derivatives are not a fundamental cause of anything.
Was it Sunday or Monday? I take it was Monday morning when you made your two collect calls and you were talking to Bear Stearns on one hand and Morgan Stanley on the other.
JP Morgan.
JP Morgan. That was Monday morning. Did you, Jeffrey, being one of the...
Now remember, according to Two World Wars and Tiny Mustache Man, my publisher's new book, the whole chapter on the BIS is about JP Morgan and JP Morgan as a Rothschild front. So keep that in mind. The history of JP Morgan and what was that, guys? I forget the first JP Morgan operative was something like Treadwell or whatever. But eventually JP Morgan became very powerful in the US as a kind of frontispiece for the Rothschild banking clique of Europe.
Financial geniuses in the world. Did you understand what Lehman Brothers going into bankruptcy, the domino effect, that by Thursday the financial system would be under such extremis that if it didn't have $1 trillion cash infusion in the United States, it might collapse? Did you know that at the time? Did you view that at the time?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah.
Why?
Again, I don't want to bore you or the audience with the idea of it's a medical procedure, but you had system failures. So you'd recognize that if I said to you, did you realize when your father was on the ground and he was clutching his chest and he couldn't...
This is the same bullshit that we heard at 9/11, right? Oh, what happened? Well, it was system failures. There was systemic failures, intelligence failures. Yeah, and just like with that event, we got massive bailouts of the intelligence surveillance superstructure being erected and set up and funded through the intelligence failures. So if you read a lot of the espionage literature, what you'll find out is that they're very candid and usually admitting that the biggest successes in intelligence agencies' histories is their great failures, because it allows them to say, oh, well, so if we just had enough funding, we would have been protected against these systemic failures.
Breathe. It was a bad situation. He could die. That's how I saw it.
Did you immediately think about the commercial paper market? I mean, the mechanical triggers that actually you had to blow through these circuit boards. Did you know the circuits? Did you understand the circuits? Or did you have a concept of the circuits that were going to get blown through?
Yes, but only because of an analogy to a body. And in fact, from my telephones against the wall with my little metal wires, because the next day I talked to another person in Washington about the issues of what I thought was happening, and I made the same discussion about the...
They were at the Treasury Department?
Yes.
So in a 6x9 cell in...
The phones were outside the cell.
Yeah, so exactly. Epstein's saying, look, it's not the fault of derivatives. America just had a heart attack. I'm sorry. Hey, listen, maybe maybe America has a little bit of a heart attack. Sorry that has to happen that way, but that's maybe what has to happen, It's a system failure.
In Palm Beach County, California?
West Palm Beach, Florida.
West Palm Beach, Florida.
That's what you juice diet.
West Palm Beach, Florida. West Palm Beach, Florida. West Palm Beach, Florida. You're making a call to Washington, D.C. to talk to some deputy secretary of Treasury.
Someone in Treasury.
Right, someone in Treasury. And that does not, the night before you go to bed, it doesn't dawn on you at all. You never have a moment of self-reflection that, how did I end up on this metal cot when I should be at the center of things?
No, I had a telephone. So I said, I can talk to... It makes no difference where I am. In fact, I'm still talking to the same person if I was at my home in Palm Beach.
So, like a true Blofeld gangster, or like something out of Goodfellas, or like he's running shit from the jail. He's like making calls and still doing his criminal Blofeld organization operations out of the damn community phone conference area at the prison. That's pretty crazy. So let's get back over to Jeff Stein McEffery, or we'll never finish this. What's on your mind?
Things as a machine. And unfortunately, so if your car breaks, cars are always easy to fix. My jets, my cars, if it breaks, I know it can be fixed because it simply follows the same pattern. If this part breaks, you replace the part and the thing works again. People and the financial system are not machines. They can't be fixed the same way. You can't simply take out put some more juice into the commercial paper market, and that's like replacing the carburetor on the car. It's much more, I have a patient who can't breathe, has a stomach problem, can't see, looks bleeding at the same time. What do I do first? I have to think about it as a system. Where's the most logical place? What's the most dangerous place? If your heart stopped, we have to start your heart again. In the equivalent to the money market, why do I have to start your heart again? I need to get your blood flowing. If your blood stops, you're dead. If liquidity, which is the equivalent of blood in the financial system, dries up.
Once liquidity is basically cash, putting cash into the
Forget
system.
about what it is.
Okay.
Liquidity is liquidity. It allows the system, it's the blood of the system. You need to pump blood hard into the body of the economy to keep it flowing. And if you, especially when you're worried about someone dying, you're not going to be worried about the niceties of, well, you got the shirt dirty and there was some damage. Pumping that blood, keep that
When
heart
you
pumping
talked to the person in Treasury on Tuesday, the 16th, did you get a feeling, as you were sitting in your 6x9 jail cell in West Palm Beach, Florida, that they were on top of things?
No, you can't. It's impossible to be on top of things. There's no such thing. It's, again, the doctor watching the patient die. You hopefully have some confidence that he's seen it before. He recognizes that there's some steps he has to take first before he bandages the guy's finger or worries about what shoes he has on. So you hope that the people in charge, your doctors who are working on the emergency patient, have enough experience and, frankly, judgment to try to keep the patient alive.
Did you think that they had those things, patience and judgment?
They had pretty good judgment, and you needed a lot of luck, just like in the dead patient. You need to, hopefully you put that blood in and it's not too late. And you make some mistakes, but you have to know you're going to have to give it a shock.
In the run-up to the September crash of 2008,
Yeah.
I guess you weren't occupied with finance. That whole summer, how long had you been in jail?
Went to jail June 30th.
So the entire summer.
So our good buddy Banana Up the Butt, one of the fattest super chatters over here, shout out to him. He's always giving these big fat Daddy Warbucks super chats. He says for $100, Jay, the genius Epstein stuff is legend. It's legend building. Yes, this is a great point. In intelligence operations and intelligence cover, you build a legend, which is your backstory, and it needs to be plausible. It needs to have, some credibility. It needs to have some details that can be verified to make it plausible to other people that, oh, you are a money manager and you worked at Bear Stearns and you had a math degree and you were at, Bill Barr's OSS front school. Yeah, so okay, you're a good dude. His system building stuff, or the systems analysis that he talks about, is a mix of the infamous document Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which we covered on my channel. That curious document, I think it is real. It describes a systemic analysis of the global architecture. It was discovered, I think, in a NSA or RAND Corporation machine, kind of laid in a copy machine years ago. It reads like a real white paper to me, like a real policy paper at a high level. We did a talk on the silent weapons paper maybe 4 years ago on the channel. And it does, I'm glad you called that to memory here, because it does sound like the type of analysis that Jeff Stein is giving. And you say it sounds like RAND Corporation stuff. Exactly. RAND Corporation, of course, has a lot of mathematicians and tech level people, including neoconservatives and Jewish Trotskyite neoconservatives like Volstetter, Herman Kahn, all of whom kind of formulated the idea of the Cold War and mutually assured destruction, rational choice theory. All of that comes out of the RAND Corporation. And by the way, we've done a lecture on Alex Abea's RAND Corporation book, Soldiers of Reason. It's one of the global elite texts. My allergies drive me crazy. And we did a mini documentary on RAND that I put on Twitter the other day. Of course, this got no views. Nobody cares about this. It's the real information. So allow me to refresh your memory. RAND is another one of the top think tanks that has engineered modern America. Kubrick, Dr. Strangelove, and Dark Secrets of the RAND Corporation. Of course, Dr. Strangelove is satirizing the RAND Corporation, and there's that. All right, let's get back to Jeff Stein here.
Yes.
Before you went into jail, you were still very active in the financial markets.
Yes.
When you say active, you trade currencies every day, you trade stocks every day. When people,
I don't do
someone like you, or you give advice to people to trade stocks or trade currencies.
I don't trade every day. I think that's, like Woody Allen said, you can't beat the bank. So I try to pick my spots. George Soros picked his spot when the pound collapsed. This would have been a great money-making opportunity that passed me by when I was in jail, but that's not how I think.
In the run-up to that, in the spring of 2008, that's when Bear Stearns got in problems, I think, in the spring of 2008, and they decided to bail it out. Did the Bear Stearns guys talk to you for advice at that time in the big crisis in Bear Stearns?
No, but see, again, unbeknownst to most people, and it's easy to blame people for the financial crisis, like you'd blame someone for giving your father the drink before he had his heart attack. But what really happened, the real enemy of the finance system was Bill Clinton. And if you ask me what and who caused the financial crisis, I would tell you it was Bill Clinton.
Because of what Bob Rubin and he did to deregulate the financial system?
No, because as of the last time we had our 60-minute interview, you talked to me about home ownership. And you asked me whether everyone should own a home. And I told you, no, it's too risky.
So the financial collapse of 2008 is because of hardworking African Americans, Hispanics, and whites who...
Bill Clinton is the fault of it? I mean, come on, dude. Who actually believes that Bill Clinton was calling the shots? Bill Clinton was chosen by David Rockefeller and others, as they bragged, at Bilderberg to be the Rockefeller candidate. There's actual videos of...
wanted to have a ownership stake in the society that all rests on their shoulders. They're the culprits.
No, not at all.
Okay, then...
I didn't say they were the culprits. I was pretty clear it was Bill Clinton.
Okay.
And why was it Bill Clinton? Because Bill Clinton wanted to get votes from those people. And he sold them the idea that instead of renting in a house, and historically the values of houses have gone up, and he said, you guys in these local communities who haven't been able to
this is
afford a
stupid.
house
We're going to
before.
skip ahead a little bit.
I refused to lend to Mr. Bannon, but now he has the big brother. His uncles can do mathematics. They can balance their checkbooks. So certain people in Congress said, well, how do you value these subprime mortgages? The banks say, we've been valuing them the same way we've always valued them for the past 20 years. The accounting firms, there's something in this country called GAAP accounting, which is a standard type of accounting, and we account for them the same way we've always accounted for them. If we paid $1,000 for your mortgage last night, when we put it on our books today, we're going to say its value is $1,000. It makes sense. I paid for it. What's its value? It's $1,000. That's what I paid for it last night. No. The Congress people said, that's not really a good answer, you know. That doesn't give us confidence that you know what you're doing. Because what happens if you have to sell it tomorrow morning? Something's happened and you have to sell it. Remember, there's kinds of stress tests. Would you be able to value it at what you paid for it the day before? And Wall Street says, that's not the way you can think about this. This is crazy. We always value things at the cost from the day before. And they changed the accounting method, in essence, to say not what it was worth yesterday, but if I have to sell, what would it be worth? That's impossible. So what happens is every bank now has to value something they bought yesterday at lower than they paid.
All right, the banking yapping is really getting old. We're going to skip ahead a little bit to the philosophy section.
Never before in 20 years did they have to do this. So something they bought at 1,000, on their books was 1,000, is now 990.
The bankruptcy of Drexel Burnham in 90, implosion of Japan, huge run-up in equity markets for the internet, implosion of the internet 2000, 10 years later roughly, and then this run-up through the Iraq War and all that, the run-up to 2008. Every 10 years it seems like we're in some sort of, 10 years before the 1990s was the 70s.
You sound like an astrologer.
Okay.
And not a finance person.
I agree with you, a mathematician. It just seems to be a pattern of every 10 years.
That's misleading. That's exactly right. Because people like to see patterns. People like to see patterns where there are none.
So a pattern of a financial crisis every 10 years is just in my mind.
Yes.
Long-term capital that had to be bailed out back in the late 90s when everybody panicked. And that bailout today would look small, and it was a $5 billion.
So I guess this is a separate day because you got a different shirt on. So maybe Bannon was doing 1 hour segments.
It was $30 billion.
Businesses fail all the time.
But they long-term capital, the Federal Reserve stepped in.
But I'm saying people go bad. Things go bad all the time.
Yes, you're correct. The audience is watching us, the little guys. They go bankrupt all the time and nobody gives a shit. You know why? They're a little guy. But when long-term capital management goes bankrupt, or Bear Stearns goes bankrupt, or Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt, people care because...
It's an unfair characterization.
Why do you say
Because again, it's the complexity of the situation. If you think about you have a complex system, you have your body. Now, in fact, the little guy is my finger. This is...
Bear Stearns is your heart.
That's correct. But the banking system is my heart. The system, I can't risk my... Because remember, it's not only
you haven't been able to name...
Hang on.
You haven't...
Hang on.
No,
I was trying to hang...
You're not good enough. You're like junior wizard trying to do it. You haven't...
Yes.
Since we can't name another guy that's as good as you, there may be a couple out there. You're not bragging. You're humble. It had to be sometime. Please tell me there was some time...
Yes, Jeffrey Epstein is very humble. Good job, Steve. Yeah, very humble.
Before you went to jail and basically got cut off from daily information in the summer of 2008, that you started to get very nervous that this complex system, that something was deeply wrong.
Okay, first, let's go back. When I say no one understands the system better than I do, it doesn't mean I
You always
understand.
sound like a doctor. You're afraid he's going to get sued for giving a thing.
Yes,
You're not taking on any liability. There's no contingent liability here for your answers.
No. But the word understand is the problem.
Okay.
I don't understand the system. So I don't understand the financial system.
Please stop. You cannot sit here and tell me.
No.
What we just went through, I'll go through again. The hedge fund man.
So this is pretty interesting because he does understand it, but he's also pointing out this kind of dark irrational side to it, to where it's like, You know, you don't understand. Like, I understand the financial system, but I also don't understand it because it's a living organism that has a life of its own.
The money managers, the central bankers, the commercial bankers, the heads of the investment banks, the heads of all the trading desks, the top economists, and I'll throw in the business school lectures at Stanford. Of all the top 200, 250, you can't name at the top of your head the guys are at least at your level. You have to understand it somewhat.
No, sorry. We all don't understand it. No one understands it. It's a miracle. That's part of the problem. It's impossible to understand. That word understand simply means if this happens here, that will happen there. It's predictable. Understanding means it's predictable. It's not predictable. That's the problem. In complex systems, that was the fascination. Is there a way to tease out some level of predictability?
So
no,
even
in fact, you would ask the question. It's a great question, which was it a stroke or a heart attack? Now, most people don't know that before they were going to have a stroke, they had a stroke. They just have a stroke. Did they understand why? In hindsight, you go back and you can make lots of explanations. It might sound good. And if you're talking to the working man, you're using language that he'll never understand. It's complex. So he, just like going to his doctor, he says he has a gastrointestinal problem, he has diverticulitis, as opposed to saying, you had a stomach ache, you ate bad food. People don't like to say it in normal, everyman terms. The system had a stroke, and we don't know why.
But you just, okay. Hardworking people, and there's a great social benefit, would you not agree, with people having ownership in the system?
When you say ownership in the system, it doesn't mean...
Let's start over.
Okay.
So flip
Sorry.
over your phone too, because
Yes.
I don't want anyone to see
Yes.
it.
All right, come on, Jeff.
Put it down.
People fucked up with this. We'll get through in this film. Right. But you cannot possibly have to sit there, knowing that you came from nowhere, knowing that you went to the very top of what is considered outside of science and maybe physics, the thing people most admire because it's like alchemy, understanding high finance, to sit there in what will be the defining financial crisis of our time, like Black Friday or Black Monday, whatever it was, in the Great Depression, and be there at that exact moment, triggered in part by a firm that you used to be a partner in and knew intimately well and created much of your initial net worth because of, and know that you couldn't, someone who lives on a phone, right?
Yes.
Because you do live on a phone, right? You had to make just two collect calls. You cannot tell me sometime during that day, you did not have that conversation with yourself of how the fuck did I do this to myself to put myself in West Palm Beach in a 6x9 cell with a metal fucking bed with a brown shirt that said trustee spelled wrong.
Did I find it amazing that I was there? That's
Not amazing. I don't want to say it's not funny. Oh, I thought
It wasn't funny.
Right.
But
Not amazing.
no, it was incredible.
Incredible in what way?
This-
Incredible like how do I do this to myself?
No. It's as incredible as me sitting here in this house. They are both just two sides of the coin. Send, drop, and all the sand starts running down the hills. That's the way I see the financial
Well, you
markets.
funded Santa Fe in the early 90s or late 80s?
I believe it was early 90s. I can get back to you.
But early 90s, Santa Fe was funded for the study of complexity theory.
So let's back up. So why did I buy a ranch in New Mexico in 1993? So that gives you some sense. I would have funded it in 1990. Los Alamos, which was the high energy lab up in New Mexico, was losing all its scientists.
And Los Alamos, it was where Oppenheimer and where a lot of the nuclear weapons were, the bomb.
That's
the
the
original
Manhattan
bomb.
Project.
Manhattan Project
Yes.
was
Yes,
that's
sir.
Los Alamos, and you bought your property out in New Mexico to be near that?
Yes, because the scientists were they cut the funding for high energy physics. But the people who worked in Los Alamos would still be in the Santa Fe area.
They cut that because this was the Cold War dividend, right?
I wanted to see if we could build tools so others smarter than me could help investigate it.
And that was the beginning of your
Santa-
concept of the Santa Fe Institute.
Yes.
And Santa Fe Institute was founded to do study in this type of...
Can these areas of strange things be described by some form of mathematics?
So that's what I'm trying to get at, the foundational thought, the organizing principle.
So he's talking about working at the Santa Fe Institute, which he said earlier was about systems analysis at a very high level and figuring out how to study and predict large-scale systems like global economics. And could it be predicted is what he's talking about.
Of Santa Fe,
Yes.
in the high physics lab at Los Alamos, which had been the headquarters of Manhattan and the Trinity Project, right, the bomb.
Yes.
So you're talking about the elite, the high priest
Of physics.
of physics.
Yes, sir.
Which, high priest of physics, some subset of that is also mathematics. isn't it?
Yes, they're both similar.
Project that.
The high priest of physics, interesting terminology. Again, suggesting that mainline normie physics, scientism, etc., as we said at the very beginning of this discussion, is a top-down enterprise, hence why all of the top new atheists were all so close to Jeff Steinbeck McCaffrey flying on the plane. You guys remember Brave New World, which we did a recent review. So I did a talk on Brave New World 10 years ago, and I pointed out the chapter where Mustafa Mond says to John the Savage, you understand that the physics and the science that we do is not what we give to the dumb public, right? Why would Huxley put that in there? Well, because the same thing then is what's going on now. There is a Reddit normie physics that's given to the dumbed down cattle. And then there's a separate secret metaphysics that they believe that they're into. They may be wrong, they may be off. That seems to be more akin to Neoplatonism, perennialism, Kabbalism, etc. So here is, I think, where he begins to talk about reality as math itself. In other words, like we live in a simulation, or that reality is a code, the matrix, this kind of stuff.
One of the tools you want to do is to make sure that in this complex system, the finance system, I'm doing a lot of this for philanthropy and a lot for the good of mankind, but also to be able to understand this complex system, the most complex outside of maybe our body, of the financial world.
Yes.
Did they create tools, or were you smarter in than the mid-aughts, 15 years later, than you had been then because of work that was done at Santa Fe?
No. It was great. But in fact, most of the money...
Oh, by the way, for those saying that there's nothing to all this, blah, 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 which is totally idiotic. Another high-level political person, Norway's ambassador, suddenly stepped down. She's named 33 times in the Epstein files, Mona Juul. So funny to see people stepping down over fake emails. So as we get into the perhaps Kabbalistic element of it, I'm not exactly sure where we're going at this point in the discussion, but I know it eventually kind of gets there. If you're looking for kind of a basic overview of how these ideas ended up influencing people like Leibniz, who Epstein will begin to talk about, as well as other Hermeticists like Hegel, you will find this introductory discussion here with Jake Rattlesnake perhaps useful as we get into the overview of what Kabbalah is. A lot of people don't know what that is. They don't understand medieval Jewish mysticism. It's also based on a lot of Neoplatonic ideas, as well as some Hebrew textual ideas out of Ezekiel and other passages, chariot magic, etc.
Most of my philanthropy in the area of, can you describe things that appear to be unexplainable by mathematics? And can you fund people who have new ideas? And unfortunately, when someone thinks they've been able to, there's a man, Stuart Kaufman, when they think okay, I figured out how to be able to predict the unpredictable, what appears to other people to be unpredictable. But my system, in those days was called genetic algorithms, can predict what things will happen, and they all want to make money. So they use their systems to try to figure out, they know they have figured out the way to make money because they figured out the unexplainable. They try, they go bankrupt, and we start again. So with a cold view, what I've come to realize is that the attempt to mathematize, formularize, or what in your prior work, to understand what really is, in today's world, still unexplainable, is impossible. They're miracles.
Your first head of Santa Fe was Christopher.
That's interesting. So he thinks of the global monetary system and the chaotic organism that is the global financial system as a mathematical thing that's alive. It almost sounds like gematria. So there's probably a gematria element, and let's not mince words here. Some of that gematria stuff is just ripped off of Pythagoras, right? Pythagoras was a number magic believer. He thought that numbers were mystical, magical things. That's a big part of Platonism and Neoplatonism. And that element, as well as when, the Hebrew text, for example, used the first several Hebrew letters as their numerical text. That's where you get gematria. It's the same with the Greeks. The Greeks, for example, used the first 10 letters as their numerals. So that principle itself is not necessarily some kind of crazy nonsense. And even within Scripture, there are elements of gematria. For example, when John uses 666 to stand for Nero, that's an example of it. Now, idiots on the internet think that gematria is some magical code that they can tap into to predict all of reality. And that kind of seems like the direction that Jeff Stein is going into. He wants to figure out if there's a way to study and map out the organism of the living mathematics that is global finance, which is odd. But makes perfect sense if you kind of know about some of the gematria and Kabbalistic ideas.
For
Langdon, I think.
Langdon from
But
Australia.
Murray Gell-Mann was
the
the funder. He was the rock.
Yes, he was the rock. He was a Nobel Prize winner?
Yes.
Yes, and a wonderful guy. He came out and helped us with the Vice for 2 project. He came with Chris Langdon.
Yeah.
Chris Langdon was the operator, the day-to-day
Chris
guy.
was doing artificial life.
Right.
Murray tried to lead his own artificial life.
Yes. When Chris came to Vice for 2 for the first big conference we had in 1994, he was one of the most impressive guys there among all the world's elite. Kew Gardens, the Lawrence Livermore Lab, the labs at Sandia, all the major universities, Lamont Doherty, all the big Earth observatories, Woods Hole. What set Langdon apart, I thought, and the reason I invited Santa Fe to be part of it, was Langdon actually made a presentation that everything, and he was making this to scientists, a lot of marine biologists, a lot of people that were just beginning, Wally Broker and people who were just beginning the study of climate change, at that time called global warming. That he made this compelling presentation that everything's really mathematics.
Yes.
It's all just back to math. And you have to, all these experiments you do, one of the reasons they're not considered by the high priest in physics as being real experiments is that they don't have a mathematical basis to it, and everything has a mathematical basis to it. Langdon seemed like a radical visionary. What happened to that concept?
Yeah, I don't think it's talking about Chris Langan. I don't know who he said. It sounds like he said Langan, but I don't think it's that Chris Langan. I think it's, I would assume somebody different, but I could be wrong. It sounds like he's talking about somebody working in AI, and I don't know if Chris Langan worked in AI or not.
You go back 350 years. So you have Isaac Newton, you have Leibniz. Move forward, you have people like Heisenberg and Gödel, and what every one of those mathematicians and philosophers came to understand is that there's something there's numbers can describe certain things, approximate certain things. But in fact, trying to put measurements and numbers on other things that are really unexplainable is folly. So 300 years ago, they said that unexplainable realm was God. And people who attempted, in fact, to explain the unexplainable, who said, yes, I understand the unexplainable, were charlatans, they were the occults, they were the astrologers, they were the con men.
Alchemist.
Yes, well, no, alchemists was in fact, they believed that there was a way to transmute one metal into another. In fact, they always wanted to see if they can create gold. There's no reason, if you think about it, they recognize that one metal is different than another metal because it has some additional pieces to it. It has additional neutrons or protons or electrons. So because they thought it was a machine, they believed it was a machine, if I can take 5 protons and add 5, that gives me 10, I should be able to get gold. Move everything around inside these systems, the molecules transmute one molecule into another, and if this molecule I've transmuted it into is gold, I'm a rich man. It's back to money. But there's something strange happens. Isaac Newton says, this is really weird. If I want to push a ball on the table, I have to touch it. Maybe I have to blow on it. But I actually have to push one side of the ball or the book to move that side. I'm pushing here, and obviously this thing is what appears to us humans to be solid, so it moves as one thing. But the only way to get something to move was to touch it or put a force against it. Okay, seems to make sense. Everybody has that experience. I want to lift a glass, I lift it. If I want to push a ball, I push it. If I want to pull a ball, I pull it. But he recognized when the ball fell off the table, it went in a different direction. How's that possible? Nobody pushed the ball down. And he says, this is crazy. Why did the ball go down? I didn't push it. I just let it go. So someone's pushing the ball, because I know that I am confident that the only thing that gets something to move is with a force that pushes. So there's a force that's pushing the ball down. In fact, he called it gravity. He measured.
I'm assuming he's going to go from Newtonian physics to quantum physics, and this is how he's going to get into the mystical stuff.
How fast it was pulled, but never was able to explain why it happened. How is it? What is gravity? It's this. Everybody says, well, why did the ball fall to the ground? Because gravity took it. But what's gravity? That's, as Feynman would say, that's the name of the thing. We have no idea what it is. This goes to Santa Fe. They were trying to explain the unexplainable. Can we measure? Can we figure out a way to predict the stock markets using these types of chaos complexity?
Before we get there, let's walk back. Let's go back to Newton.
Sure.
Pre-Newton, and then Newton. What did Newton solve that for millennia up to Newton had not been solved? And then I want to go forward all the way to Santa Fe, what they were trying to solve. Let's start with just 2 or 3 of the basic guys, but let's go with Newton. What pre-Newton, it was what, and then why is Newton such a
genius?
In the, I think mathematically they told me one time I've seen there's been 115 billion people roughly that have lived on the earth. And of that 115 billion, Newton.
Are you sure that's a number? That sounds a lot, very high. We only have 7 now.
I think in the history of the earth, I think I'll pull up the stat for you. But I think it's 115 billion people they figured.
That probably is inflation. That's why
have lived on Earth. But he's on the handful of the most important. What did he solve for? Why is he so important for how we live today? And then we want to go through Leibniz and the other 2 or 3 other major ones to get us to Santa Fe.
Well, it's a long journey.
This is the heart of what we're trying to do.
Let me take a bit of a detour just a second. What if you went to high school and the last year in your high school you took calculus? So Isaac Newton sort of invents calculus. Well, that sounds mathematicians.
To torture seniors in high school before they graduate.
Yes, but obviously, no. Yes, the answer is yes. Certain people can never do calculus.
Why is that? Why is calculus so? Why is that the dividing line between, to me, people who can handle that and can go on to do certain things, and people just hit the wall, even if they know math? It seems to me that there's the calculus is the thing that changes. It bridges. That's because it's about the theory of change.
Dude, will Bannon let him answer the questions? Bannon's getting annoying here.
Change in the theory of how things change?
It's a great question. But in fact, what calculus does is it's somewhat philosophical. That's why mathematics Newton wasn't a mathematician, he was called a geometer. That's what they used to call themselves. They understood geometry and numbers. But there's an old conundrum where it says, if Pythagoras' days, Zeno's paradox it's called, where they said, well, if the wall is 2 feet away from me, and I take one step that's halfway to the wall, that'll be 1 foot away. And if I take another step that's half again, that'll be half a foot away, then 1/4 of a foot. I could walk forever but never touch the wall. Doesn't sound realistic, doesn't make any sense in our real lives of the physical. But what Newton understood is many problems were like that. Many things approached the wall, or in calculus, approached the limit. but never really reached it. So he said, it's okay, you don't have to reach it. We can do lots of the mathematics as if it was so close, it was almost there. And we can do lots of mathematics almost being at the limit. And this is really important, Steve, for today. Because most of the science up until today.
Who's that walking around? Is that just Lane walking around in the background? Somebody's peeping around.
Was things that starting to approach the limit. You were taught in high school that if you had 1 divided by 0, if you remember your high school algebra, you were told, what's the answer to that? Is there an answer?
Okay, come on, dude. Let's get to the point.
1 divided by 0? No, if you were in high school, it's like, stay away from it. It's the boogeyman. You could write it down as it's undefined. It's not able to be determined. There's a bunch of things. But in fact, 1 divided by 0 is a strange things happen. It's a world of the strange. And what I'll explain to you after is that when you get 1 divided by 0, you get into a world we don't know what happens. The answer is it's not.
Oh, shit, dude. Somebody said that was Candace astral projecting into the video. Damn. And by the way, if Charlie had that time tech, there's no reason Candace couldn't go back in time and astral project into the Bannon interview, dude. That's what that was.
Explainable. We can call it things like undetermined. We can have a convention to say it's X, Y, or Z. But in real life, we don't know what happens when you are actually at the limit. So Newton thought the same concept, is that the limits were God. You got close to God, but you can never be God. He had this sort of religious interpretation.
Okay, I want to go back to Newton. Why is Newton such a big dividing line in mankind's history? What is it about Newton? What is it about what he's trying to solve? What did they not know beforehand? And because we live to a degree.
Doesn't everybody know this from like first level, like your first physics class in college? Like, why do we need I know people want to question Newton and they want to, people believe in quantum physics. I know all that. I'm just like, it's just bizarre that we went from corruption and high finance to Bannon wanting an introductory course on Newtonian physics of cause and effect. That's just weird.
Newtonian universe, although I realized later subparticle atomic physics, but at least for a while it was Newtonian. So what's the dividing line? Why is he so important? Why is he an inflection point in mankind's movement from the swamp to the stars?
It's a great question. Stars by Kepler. What Newton starts to allow us to do is to make accurate predictions. Remember that we've talked about that with money, about the things in our physical world, how cars, he didn't have cars, how horse carriages moved, how bowling balls moved, how pool cues and pool table balls.
And people tried to solve that before Newton?
Many.
Heraclitus or Plotinus, Pythagoras had these great.
Come on, dude.
He knew, again, but it was all numbers. This was a system of things in the physical world, and Pythagoras says we can start putting numbers on things that help you predict how they will behave. You can add 2 triangles and make a square, some different shapes. They were looking at geometric forms. Newton says, well, I want to know how planets move. I want to know how things around me move. Can we find formulas? Can I find formulas that explain what I see in the physical world, how physical things interact and how they describe one another? Again, the fact that 2 solid masses, for some very strange, unknown reason, unknown today, attract one another, no matter what they are. People have seen the experiment. You hang something, 2 little metal balls from a string, they move towards each other. In fact, they move towards each other was a very...
Yeah, there's different theories about whether Leibniz discovered calculus or Newton, or did they actually independently both discover calculus? It's an interesting point, but...
Very specific. So when you drop the ball to the floor of this room, Newton says, in fact, the room came up a bit to meet the ball. The room moved. It's imperceptible. You can't really perceive that motion, but they attracted each other with certain ratios. So he started to be able to measure things in the physical world. And that was great advances. It also, you wanted to move very quickly. Unfortunately, most people, especially in the 20th century, 19th century, said, well, like Newton, let's measure everything. Let's measure people's behavior. Let's measure their psychology. Let's measure their health. You go to we could have
So this is like quantification, right? The idea that everything can be quantified. And now we know Bannon has an interest in perennialism and, the traditionalist so-called school. So Bannon has read Evola and presumably Fritjof Schuon and Guénon. So this seems to be verging into the, reign of quantity from Guénon, that kind of stuff.
Like that. So let's measure everything. Measure Wall Street.
Their voting habits.
Measure. Can we put a number on how much I care for my wife? Can I put a number on how I feel? And we tried, unfortunately, try to mathematize
It's called quantification.
Minor things in life. And then recognize that there's things that, unfortunately, just fall outside. Everyone, Schrodinger.
Yeah, that's a great point. Normies think this is genius talk, right? So like this is even like, isn't this like 8th grade physics? Like people think 8th grade's physics class talk is like
wow, this is like high brain stuff. Wow, this is high tiered stuff.
But I'm terrible at math. I don't remember any of that math shit, but like I know this stuff. Like I remember a lot of this. Like this isn't even. This is why normies will fall for like the most ridiculous word salad, right?
Wrote a very famous book about what is life. He was trying to figure out a way, can he describe the difference, formula between things that are alive and things that are dead? The answer is no. The things that are alive in my world are miracles, not magic. Magic has a bad connotation.
You don't believe in the spirit or the soul? That's what animates people, is your spirit or your soul. That's
No.
but have you ever seen someone die? When they die, their spirit leaves.
Their soul leaves, no question. So in
There's
fact,
no question to you about
no
that.
question.
There's no question to you that there is some animating life force within us that leaves when you're dead.
Yes, in fact, I refer to the soul. There's obviously a certain, the questions in the past, even
Because
during
people would normally think you were soulless. So
Thank you.
to have you talk about you actually believe in it and have done some thinking about it is pretty shocking in its own right, isn't it?
well, again, mathematics, Leibniz thought.
So Newton was at Cambridge, and he was the head of the math department, right? He's a professor,
Yes,
essentially.
yes.
But Leibniz, was Leibniz a German professor?
Yes, but what Leibniz said is the soul is so strange because God took chemicals, which is simply the material, like tables, and he somehow made this material able to have a thought. How strange is that? Not only does it have a soul, but this some way it was put together that this material substance is able to think. So when you say to me, it's obvious to everyone that there's such a thing as a soul. Now, if you're part of the charlatanville, you'll try to explain it to people. The soul I describe as the dark matter of the brain. Why is it dark matter? Because in high energy physics.
Wait a minute, Jeff. Let's do a little pre-supping of Jeff Stein McIffer here. Religion and con artists are the ones that try to explain the soul. But by the way, here's my explanation of the soul. So are you admitting that you're a con artist?
Nowadays you hear terms of dark matter, dark energy. Again, terminology. It's a complicated term. Why is it dark matter? Because we can't see it, that's all. What do you mean you can't see it? Well, somehow we see something moving towards this area of darkness. Something, I can see this thing. This appears to me to be empty. It's just black. But I see it being drawn this way. So I say, well, I know if this were matter, that would follow that equation. If this was solid, it would explain the way this particle moves.
Yeah, I'm not detecting high levels of genius here. I'm detecting like basic familiarity with basic ideas. That's so far what I'm detecting here. So, I mean, I guess what he said about Leibniz is kind of true, but I mean, you could read a Wikipedia entry and kind of get that much of it.
But I can't see anything here. So I'll just call it dark matter. And I'll say, I don't know what it is, but it behaves as if there was something there. The soul is obvious to everyone that there's something different between things that are alive and things that are not alive. But we have no idea what it is. It's currently unexplainable. I believe we need an entirely different system of analysis to try to figure out.
No, with Newton,
So interesting. So he is talking about sort of mystical ideas here. So are we going to get full Kabbalism? Let's see where we go.
all his alchemical studies and things he worked on the spiritual side. Leibniz had just talked about the soul. Schroeder talked about what is life. If a modern scientist or someone that you funded at MIT or Harvard or one of these things talked in those types of terms, they would be considered to be a wingnut today, wouldn't they? They would not be on the path for tenure, right?
Unless they were in the philosophy department.
This is exactly my point. We're talking about three of the greatest mathematicians in mankind's history that have really changed mankind. Talking like this, what happened? How do we get to a situation where they could not be in the high physics? They could not be in the mathematics department or working in high energy physics.
Good, it's an easy answer. Newton was a combination of mathematician or geometer then and philosopher, and as time went on, those disciplines seemed to.
Well, Newton was an alchemist, so he didn't. I mean, he referenced alchemy earlier and said he kind of gave some credence to the possibility of the transmutation of matter, that he thinks that's legit. And now he's talking about Newton, who was a committed hermeticist alchemist.
Move apart. We had philosophy. Some of the philosophers can't do math, and some of the mathematicians. And again, mathematicians often break into two categories: people that solve problems. Those are more like geometers in the old days, just problem solvers. And then there's thinkers, theoreticians. They're more like the old movement towards philosophy. But neither one of those two groups have been able to figure out why something is alive as opposed to something that's not alive. No one's been able to describe what the soul is, but we all know it exists. And I think what we need is a new. Science is a bad word. I think science only describes the things we already know about the physical world. In fact, there's an argument that the physical world that we see has been created out of our systems of mathematics.
So there you have a Pythagorean, Kabbalistic argument that reality itself is mathematics or numbers. And you do find this in some of the well-known famous physicists out there like Max Tegmark. Max Tegmark, for example, thinks that reality literally is numbers, which is, again, kind of the ancient Pythagorean and Platonic position. So that's definitely where he's coming from, whether you believe it or not. And it's interesting because I've said for a long time that I think that probably the elites themselves, and I'm not saying that he's really some kind of like, he really knows the science. He seems to be more of a sued, but a very well-connected sued, an organized crime figure. They have a different physics. And that's exactly what I've been saying all along. And I said that years ago because Brave New World says that. Mustafa Mon says to John the Savage, yeah, we have a different physics and science that is nothing to do with what we put out to the normies. We debase the normies through deracinating toxic culture, and we have a separate understanding and discourse that we do. And it sounds like mystical Neoplatonic stuff, and that's exactly what Epstein McCaffrey is saying here.
Mathematics, everyone knows mathematics describes the physical world much greater than it should. Unless you, my view, the physical world really comes out of conscious beings that have mathematics. So they create it. This table appears to you and I to be solid. To a bat, because we have light that's bouncing off the table into our eyes, it appears solid. If instead of eyes that responded to wavelengths of visual light, our eyes responded to radio waves, the radio frequencies, it's not different, it's the same type of frequency as light with different speeds, the table's invisible. We know that our phone works in this room. So the waves are coming through the windows, the waves are coming through the walls. So the walls are invisible to that type of radiation, that type of energy. The walls are, I can see them because my eyes, a physical system, determines that the walls are there.
Now we're going full David Icke here. 5 cents reality. 5 cents reality.
Murray Delman, you founded,
We just need Jeff Stein McEvery to talk about the Cheetah Ori next. Cheetah Ori.
or the original donor, and had the idea of Santa Fe Institute. 10 or 15 years later, that effort to study the complexity of systems mathematically.
Yes.
Let's finish this. We're almost to the end of it.
Each other, and everyone has the same feeling. They've seen someone walk in the room and they say, oh, that person gives me a creepy feeling. Science has tried to describe, science
This is, I mean, wow, 6 cents. This is so deep.
doesn't describe what creepy feelings means. They just know it's a creepy feeling. I think women, as I said,
Jeff must be describing the feeling that many women had when he came into the room. So he must be very familiar with people having the creepy feeling phenomenon.
last time, have an intuitive sense. What is intuitive? They have intuition, they have feelings, and they're able to deal in the realm of things that men, especially men like myself, find unexplainable. Women have intuition, men see things a bit differently. Men want to measure everything, women are not really.
Oh, see, he's an intuitive bro. Right? We had a lot of callers tonight calling in with their intuition. We should just follow their intuition. Candace, just follow my intuition. Don't worry about a bunch of research and reading books. Just follow my intuition. Well, it turns out Jeff Stein McEvery is he's a defender of women. He's a good old feminist at heart. Good old Jeff Stein McEvery. Women have a more deeply seated intuitive sense. Now, do you think Jeff really believed that, given what he says in all of the other private communications, particularly with regard to eugenics and IQ and all of the nasty times that he speaks of the Wiggers?
Interested in measuring.
In what you're saying in macro terms, you actually think science, mathematics, maybe ultimately technology, is moving to that more intuitive.
I think science and math are old-fashioned. And unfortunately, people are still taught that they have.
Yeah, we need a new science that's lady-led. I'm ready for slay queen science, slay science, girl. And it's just going to be what I feel at the moment. By the way, Candace going to be the high priestess of the new science, because it's whatever I dreamt. It's whatever I feels at the moment. And it's whoever I don't like. They is canceled, unscientific. That's the new science. And you heard it from Jeff Stein McEvery right there yourself.
To learn algebra in school and certain things in school, as opposed to learning to have
Is this what Larry Summers was trying?
By the way, this is the public consumption stuff. Katy Perry going to be the new science queen. Remember when what his name was? Fauci. Y'all remember Fauci?
Fauci said, I am the science. Don't disagree with me. I am the science.
Well, Jeff Stein is saying Katy Perry is the science of the future.
To get at, maybe didn't say.
By the way, why do you hate women if you don't support? So hold on. If you are against, but if you're a feminist, then you're pro Jeffrey Epstein. See, now we're toying with the fallacies, right?
perfectly enough, but what he was trying to get to in that system, the systems we study today, the way mathematics is either taught or understood.
Jeff Stein be like,
So basically what I'm saying is that Earth is too ashy, okay? Earth, you see, is very ghetto. It's very ashy, it's very ghetto. And we want to unghettify and unash the Earth with a large quantity of Diddy oil that would then moisturize the Earth to make it no longer ashy.
That women just haven't gotten up to the highest realms of engineering or physics or mathematics because of that.
because they was oppressed, dog. Because the patriarchy was oppressing the women. See, you ladies, y'all had a negative appraisal of Jeff Stein McEffery all these years. Y'all thought he was a bad dude. He's on your side. He's trying to get you a damn STEM job. He's trying to get your stem cells and get you a STEM position, girlfriend.
And you're actually implying that there's a either new branch of science or we've hit an inflection point like in Newton that's going to go in a Newton took mankind in a different direction because he was able to measure. Then you had subatomic, non-Newtonian physics later. Are you saying that you think there's another developing field that's coming up that may take us, I don't know how many decades to get our hands around, but that's what's evolving out of this?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I think that mathematics, it's not the end of science. Every year someone says it's the end of, we can't discover everything. There's lots to discover with relationship to the physical world, but we know a lot already. In respect to the unexplainable world, we almost know nothing.
Somebody was calling him Jeffrey Simpstein. We have the smartest, funniest chat on the internet. I swear, dude. You guys make me cry laughing all the time.
Women, again, sense it. And instead of Larry Summers, I won't digress too much, but Howard Gardner early on said, there's not one form of intelligence.
It just occurred to me how amazingly transparent this is, how hypocritical the mainline voices of feminism are. This is a man who steals, grapes, traffics women, young women, and he's publicly a feminist women's rights supporter. Amazing the level of just absolute. And by the way, how many of the major voices of feminism, especially the male feminists, how many of them have we seen exhibit the exact same traits where they get busted for some grape scandal or some insane level of weird deviancy that they're into? Isn't that interesting? Shocker, right?
It's not mathematical intelligence. There's emotional intelligence. There's kinesthetic intelligence. There's this argument that I reject that black people are less intelligent than white people. It's not true.
Oh, really? Is that why all of your text messages and private communications say the exact opposite? Because you talk about genetics research and all the connections between genetics and IQ? Interesting.
We know, for example, that if I was in the forest and I had to run from the lion or figure out a way not to be eaten, and my competition is a local African, I'm the one who's getting eaten because they have the intelligence to deal with their local environment. So,
wait, what? Was he just saying that if I was in Africa, the black people would eat me, and so I would not be intelligent? But he was in the context of defending black people as not low IQ, but then saying that they're gonna eat me. Like, what? That was a wild twist there, Jeff.
It's just different. It's not better, it's not worse, but there's many differences amongst different types of people. And so people have different intelligences, and they excel in some intelligences usually, and less so in others.
Wanting to come to, because the world of high finance is a world of pure reason, or is it a lot of emotion and gut checks and on trading desk and central banks when these decisions get made? Is it that?
Oh, he was saying he was running from a lion? Didn't he say cannibal? I thought he said the word cannibal.
High church, like the high church of science of high energy physics, or is it as much emotion that comes in as much as the mathematics and the reason?
The high church of high energy physics? Bizarre terminology.
It's a great question. I think if you talk to really experienced and successful traders.
Somebody said Epstein because he's fleeing around in Africa from the cannibal tribe. Was it lions or cannibals?
And you ask them how they know what's going on. They can't give you an answer. They don't know. They feel it. They can feel the way the market's moving. They can feel the way the stock's moving. And these are not very well-defined terms. It's difficult to put in mathematics terms. How did I feel it? You could look back and make guesses what I was seeing. But great traders feel it and then act on their feelings. That's the difference. Many people feel it but are afraid because they want a mathematical justification.
Now I'm starting to think it really is human jerky because he's talking about, I thought he said cannibals eating him in Africa. Was it lions or I'm confused. I don't know. I'm lost.
Before they take.
We're five hours into this.
When you first got on the trading desk at Bear Stearns in the late 70s or mid 70s, were you shocked by how little actual understanding of mathematics that the traders comprehended?
Yeah, again, we had a Texas Instrument calculator. Most stockbrokers, especially before 1975, if they were good stockbrokers, could add. That's about it. They could multiply. If you could multiply, you were already in the top 15% of stockbrokers. Stockbrokers simply meant that
Jafar Epstein.
There's a story. When I went to the first person, I had no money. And I said, how much money do you make a year? And he said, $400,000. I said, impossible. I'm making $10,000.
That's probably more than your family had made in its entire existence.
Yes. And he makes it in a year. I said, what do you do? And he said, it's too complicated for you to understand, which is what the main thrust of Wall Street people, they want to tell you it's too complicated. Because if you understood that that person was simply, he had a brother-in-law, in fact, in this case, who ran the pension fund of General Motors. His brother-in-law would call him and say, buy 1,000 IBM. He'd hang up the phone, he'd write it out on a ticket and walk it to a window. That was his entire skill set. Hello, write what my brother-in-law says, walk it to a ticket window.
Give me an example when you were on the trading desk in the
Okay,
early days
come
of Bear
on,
Stearns
Jeff.
of a time that you felt either complete uncertainty or you saw total panic, where people...
That's why it's so exciting now, because I think certain people are starting to realize that there's so many things that are unexplainable that we have to think about them differently. Music is a great example. It's a common man's example. You know when you hear a certain song, it makes you feel a certain way. How does it do that? We don't know. We can't mathematize it. And even that music, Steve, nowadays we compress music. When you have a violin, it's compressed onto your iPhone. So what does compression mean? I'm taking lots of information and I'm cutting it into lots of pieces and squishing it together. And when I squish it, to take out lots of pieces, but I say that they're not very important pieces.
El Baloo, $5. What would Cat Williams say about this?
Listen. I'm gonna tell y'all right now, ain't no Justin McGaffrey going up in my booty hole, okay?
It's those pieces that we take out when we compress data, to me, are the most interesting parts of life.
You just said a while ago, so part of this new search for science may go back to when people were actually talking about a soul, and you said there's no doubt in your mind that there is a soul. Describe for me what you mean by that. What do you mean by soul? What do you mean soul different than the physical analog body that we're seeing on film right now?
It's difficult to describe in words. I mean, I'm not a poet. Poems get a little closer to what that really means. But even the concept of what is life becomes complicated when you deal with plants and seeds. Is a seed alive? I don't know. Certain people would say, no, it's dead. When you're a banana, one of my favorite examples is the banana that's sitting on the countertop in your kitchen today. Is it alive or dead?
What do you think about human life? Tell me about human life.
But your banana is alive.
This is funny because this is their text email exchange where they have this conversation about whether the banana is alive. And then they're like, okay, but is it conscious? It's just goofy.
That banana's breathing. It's on your... You say, that's impossible, Jeffrey. No, it's not.
Is the banana conscious?
All these words, these are words. So everyone's trying to fit very complicated concepts into a very small box called conscious or alive. These don't fit in that way. So if you put your banana in a bag and put another fruit in with it, the fruit ripens faster because the banana breathes with it. We don't understand most of those things. So you asked the big question. Sorry.
You talk about the life. What about human life?
What about it?
Tell me what do you think? What do you think human life is?
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. And when I say miracle, I can't explain it, and I make no attempt to explain it at the moment. We don't know how to think about it. And anyone, again, another one of the Feynman quotes when he was talking about quantum physics. He said, anyone, Jeffrey, who says they understand quantum physics and quantum mechanics and quantum behavior, you know they're lying.
Let's talk about it. That's post-Newtonian. Talk about what's the difference? Who founded quantum mechanics? Why?
It's funny because even though this is new agey, he also kind of sounds like a Reddit bro too, right? He's like a Reddit bro normie with a lot of this stuff, which is cracking me up.
Is quantum mechanics taking Newtonian physics and taking it to the next level?
It forms a much broader category.
Let's go back to this desk. You used the thing of Newton using this desk. Why can't Newton's theory explain everything? Why did subatomic quantum mechanics or quantum physics have to come in to explain this?
Well, so let's go right back to square one. Why is it called quantum physics? So quanta is a word that simply means packet, small amount. So it's quantized. So when we recognize that this table appears, another very complicated word, solid to us, it's really made up of molecules or atoms. And atoms, we've given lots of names to what some of the behaviors.
Wow, this is really deep. So we're back to 7th grade level physics class. This is amazing.
If you were in school, when you and I were in school in the 50s, the model was a little center thing in the middle, and an electron went around and around it. It was seen as a ball that went around and around it. And as we started to look at, say, well, let's see what this ball looks like. I want to be able to examine that little thing called an electron. We found...
Yeah, a lot of Abdullah Monkey coded references here with the bananas and the, evolution, and this is getting really deep.
But there was nothing there. There wasn't the thing. It was simply a cloud of...
I like how they're discussing things that you would literally hear in like your introduction to philosophy class, like the first day. This is the stuff that comes up, like literally in intro to philosophy. Okay. Which I remember intro to philosophy. I had a great intro to philosophy professor. He was a Humean skeptic, but he was a great professor. And this is literally the stuff that we talked about. It was like, all right, let's talk about philosophy. And he was not a Jewish guy. He was a chubby, kind of alcoholic dude. with a big gut, and he would just kind of he would just sort of hold the chalk like this, and he would rest his hand on his gut, and he would go, yeah, well, so it's like the number 7. Right? Is number 7 alive? What is it? Where is it? How do we know what it is? What do you guys think? Right? That's like day 1 of introduction to philosophy in college, your first day. And it's funny to me because like he and Bannon think they're having this like 200 IQ level conversation that no one can even barely understand. And it's literally what you would talk about like in the first day of philosophy class.
That we can call an electron. So we already started to see mysterious things as we go into very super small quantities, quantum physics. So quantum physics started to go into the very small and at very small distances.
Wow. So quantum physics about small quantities is actually about the physics of small quantities. Damn. This shit is blowing my mind, dude.
We see things that we can't explain. We just cannot explain.
How am I doing on time?
4 minutes.
Fine.
We got face lords and we got mind lords. But by the way, this is also why the new atheists in his sphere were so influential and were so effective from the 2000s up into, the death of that stuff, 5 or 6 years ago. It's dying out on YouTube. You have the last dying gasps of it with Professor Dave and Derek Mythvision and all that. Like, this explains why this was so easy to pass off on people, was because people were dumbed down and they were stupid and being introduced to a lot of these topics. And because people don't study philosophy, they think that this is, oh my gosh, the dark enlightenment, dude. These people are so smart, bro. And then you notice anytime that they encounter anybody with like just a mid-tier level of philosophy, they're like, oh, why is it big words? What logic is? What that mean?
What that is? What that is? What that mean? What that mean?
Right? They go full Bryson Gray.
Logic, what that is? What that mean? What that mean?
And to summarize, no, sorry.
Let's go back to human life. When do you think human life starts?
It's not these. So you see, this is the question. You're asking me to measure something again. It's the
It
disease.
can't be measured. You just hate making commitments.
I'm not married.
I'm peeling this onion back a layer at a time. All your bullshit and happy target can't be measured like that. Is that to say measure it's a commitment. You don't even like a commitment when you
Did you just say all your bullshit?
answer a question.
I don't
As
know.
they say in golf, commit to the shot.
I don't know what it means to be measured.
You do know what it means to be measured. You're one of the leading currency traders, hedge fund guys, or stock market financial wizards. You're in the high priesthood of high finance.
You're in the high priesthood of high finance. Interesting commentary there from Bannon. And by the way, no, the fact that he's in finance has absolutely no connection at all with the ability for him to measure things in physics or in philosophy. So it's like, so many people think that being fluent, and proficient in one discourse or one domain makes them experts in everything. It's such a weird phenomenon.
You certainly know how to measure. That's why you're a billionaire. Any other answer besides that is total and complete bullshit. And you know it.
I know very few things.
You know things to be measured. You measure every day. You weigh and measure every day. You weigh and measure people. You weigh and measure leaders. You weigh and measure economies. You weigh and measure politics.
It's a very
you,
good.
you weigh and measure. You weigh.
Hang on.
Your whole life, in fact, is measuring.
So what you've now done is a great thing. Is you've used the word measure, a mathematic term, in a common vernacular and abused it. So I don't even recognize what it means. It's so abusive.
Oh, damn. He just called out Bannon for a word concept fallacy. Damn. Jeff Stein on the rack. He on the right track now. Shit. He just went full category error, full grammatical word concept error on Bannon. Ooh.
My field.
Why? Let's go to that. In mathematics, measure means what specifically?
There's no specific. It's an approximation or giving something a number. Einstein
We're
said,
not asking you to go to the ninth decimal point.
Oh, you didn't say that before.
No, you're not going to the ninth.
I don't
decimal
even. What if I say measure? How tall are you? You'd say in your case 6 foot.
6 feet.
But is it 6 foot 1 inch?
Give or take. It's between 5'11" and 6 feet.
But what's that? But I want. So the question is, I want an accurate.
I got Zeno's paradox.
I don't even know what it means to measure you. Is it?
Oh my gosh, this is so retarded. Now I see why people were calling this all Sued shit, right? Because I thought we were gonna have something interesting with the Leibniz stuff. It wasn't even about Leibniz. It was like 2 seconds about Leibniz, and then 30 minutes of word concept fallacies and just yapping suitery.
Am I measuring the top of your hair, the top of your skull? The finer, the more.
You're being rabbinical. This is like.
I shaved my beard off. I used to be rabbinical.
Oh, based. Oh, he called him out. Rabbinical based. Oh, Bannon's so based.
Isn't that going through the Torah where you're parsing every every definition.
No, so-
However we broadly define measure, your life literally is about measurement, is it not?
It's about putting numbers on things.
By the way, both Suds and actual academics do the same thing. So sometimes this is hard to parse out, especially if you're a non-intelligent person. A non-intelligent person can't tell the difference between a Sud and an actual scholar or academic, because both of them will say,
Depends on what you mean. Well, depends on what you mean. What do you mean by soul? What do you mean by that? Well, fuck,
so both Suds and actual scholars will do this. But I think in the case of Suds, they do it to be kind of playing games, to not actually give you a clear answer as to what they're referring to.
So that I can try
that's
my
measurement.
best. You can call it whatever you like. If that
Well,
makes you feel better.
What did you know?
No, I
Wasn't
want to make it
related
happen.
back to your scientific inquiry.
No, even a number. People don't. A number is a complicated.
When did
thing.
you come? When did you come to this When did you come to this aha moment? Was it when it was in your solitary confinement, when the biggest financial crisis?
Somebody said this, Nick said this is a practice interview. That could be true, that maybe that's why we've only got the first 2 hours, but supposedly this is like many, many hours. I don't know if that's the case, but didn't Bannon do several? But I think this was supposed to like rebrand Epstein as a philanthropist, I think was what some of the emails or something said. Let's finish Jeff Stein.
In world history was going on in your 7x9 jail cell with your metal bed and your two brushes because you were a trustee with the brown uniform on, trustee spelled wrong. Is that the moment of clarity that you had about science and Newtonian physics and everything that we can measure is really not going to be the way we go forward? It's going to be much more.
Speaking of Dawa, by the way, I thought it was pretty funny that, did you guys notice that Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, made a video saying that Dawa has basically failed? All the Dawa people and their whole thing is like collapsed, and it really didn't work. It's funny to see the Muslims owning each other over that. That's cracking me up.
Esoteric, emotional intelligence thing. Was that your moment of clarity?
I wish it was, because it would make such a great story for this interview, but it's not. It's the fact that I lead such a privileged life to come across.
But when did you? If it didn't happen then, when did it? Or did it happen before?
I was going to hopefully get to the.
Okay.
I'm in a privileged position to have some of the world's smartest people come to my house and tell me what they think about different subjects, and I finally realized that the thing that they had most in common was there was this area, no matter how smart they were, that when I asked them the questions, they said they'd have to resort to a 500 or 1,000-year-old response to that question, which was, I don't know.
Oh, really? Interesting. I wonder if that commonality between all of these new atheists and new dorks was something else. Jack, $10. Isn't this a practice interview? Bannon is media training him for a 60 Minutes interview. Oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, if that's the case, that does make a lot of sense. Because they were talking about like rebranding him, or making him into a philanthropist.
You know who else found that out? Socrates. So that's what Socrates kept doing, right? Socrates kept asking all the experts.
Oh wow, dude! Jeff McEffrey is just a philosopher, dude. He's just a philo bro. He's just like Socrates, man. He's just like asking the deep, penetrating questions about reality and life. That's all he's doing. He's a great dude deep down, just asking hard questions, man. What's the meaning of life, bro? Where do I put the pee-pee and the poo-poo, bro? That's all he's doing.
He would go through, question after question after question, and realize at the end they didn't really know. They really didn't basically understand what they were talking about.
And one of the things that people won't enjoy, it turns out that potentially one of the bad things to teach children is how to write. It's impossible.
What? So we got full Common Core. Jeff Stein is I never thought he would go full Obama Common Core.
Writing, reading, and arithmetic was supposed to be, everyone's supposed to be taught. But writing forces you into a very narrow channel of thinking. You have to write in a certain form, in a certain way, in a certain linear pattern. So your thinking becomes somewhat narrow. The reason I brought up writing is one of the recent discoveries of mine with respect to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle is they never wrote anything. They spoke, and people around who could write wrote. Socrates could think. So that was.
Jesus of Nazareth was the same way, right? Never wrote anything.
I thought he was a carpenter.
He was a carpenter.
Didn't he need like a little carpenter's tonight? I don't get that.
But at least his written record.
Right.
One last thing.
Sure. Thank you for having me to your house.
Let's go back.
Let's put vegetables.
When did that? The beginning of that, was there any one aha moment in all these great thinkers? Did it happen before 2008? Was it after? That came up over, I know, many years, but when did you actually realize, hey, something new's got to be developed?
Yeah, that's great. Is that because, again, I'm privileged enough to have people around me who've given lots of philanthropic gifts to institutions of higher learning. And when I said...
Oh, wow, that's so sweet. Everybody was just so giving, and there's so much charity and philanthropy. And what better cover for... Blofeld level crime villains than international charity, right?
the impact. How do you judge the impact of your giving? And we sat down and said, no really new ideas have come out. And I realized that, of course, it hasn't come out because we've been looking at using science and mathematics, and it's the wrong tool. It's obvious.
It's $5. Jay, where did Epstein get his money from? Just the island? Well, if you read Whitney Webb's book, she's got 2 or 3 chapters where she puts forth various theories as to where he might have gotten money or been a money manager. But I don't know that anybody knows 100% for sure. It's kind of theorized unless somebody has sort of dug through the files and found something explaining exactly what was going on in terms of money management.
Why is it not dirty money?
Because I earned it.
But you earned it. We went back to this before. You earned it. You earned it advising the worst people in the world, right? That do enormous bad things, and just to make more money.
So instead of asking me the question, should you take the money? Because I think it's a legitimate question.
Do you think it's a legitimate?
Oh, when he got pinned, he's about to do a what about? He's about to do a tu quoque.
Yes, no question. Because I think ethics is always a complicated subject. But I can tell you that with the money I gave to help try to eradicate polio,
Okay. So like Bill Gates, he's a philanthropist, eugenicist to help eradicate polio.
Pakistan and India. Instead of asking me whether that money should be given to these children for vaccines, I think you might want to ask their mothers who receive.
Oh, now where have we seen this line of argumentation? Oh, Sam Harris. Oh, you want to question atheism? What about that child that's crying right now that was bombed by a terrorist? What about that? What about this emotional appeal? So when asked, what do you think ethically about providing financial services for the worst people in the world? He does a tu quoque. Well, how about you tell me about the mothers whose children were saved by, this is so silly.
The vaccine, who know their child now won't get polio, and ask them if Epstein should have helped these people.
Yeah, immediate virtue signaling, which is a huge red flag.
If we walked into, you're a mathematician. We walked into that clinic where they're giving that money out to these people that are in the most dire straits of poverty and sickness, and told them that the money was coming from class 3 sexual predator?
Tier 1.
What's tier 1's the highest and worst?
No,
I'm the lowest. You're the
yes.
lowest. Okay, tier 1, you're the lowest. But a criminal.
Yes.
That the money came from. What percentage of people do you estimate? I understand you don't like probabilities. Do you estimate would say, I don't care, I want the money for my children?
I would say everyone said, I want the money for my children.
Did they know where the money came from?
I think if you told them, if I told them the devil
himself
said, I'm going to exchange some dollars for your child's life.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question. Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Because you have all the attributes. You're incredibly smart. You remember the devil. Somebody knows the devil's brilliant. You read Milton's Paradise Lost.
No, the devil scares me.
Satan is at the number 1 or 2 archangel, and the reason he goes to hell and leads the rebellion is because he can't be the top guy. And his thing is, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. I saw that in a movie once called American Dharma. I don't remember who said it. Okay, you have to go.
Called a what? American what? What did you say? What was the movie? I'm over here trying to get Epstein movie recommendations now. Y'all saw Epstein's playlist too. When somebody found that, like his iPod play, it was a bunch of weird ass music you wouldn't expect. So what was the movie?
Serious question. Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Because you have all the attributes. You're incredibly smart. You remember the devil is somebody knows. The devil's brilliant. You read Milton's Paradise Lost.
No, the devil scares me.
Satan is at the number 1 or 2 archangel.
Today, Junior.
And the reason he goes to hell and leads the rebellion is because he can't be the top guy. And his thing is, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven.
I saw that in a movie once called American Dharma. I don't remember. American
Dharma? That's weird. What is that? We over here getting Epstein. He's gone full Siskel and Ebert over here. It's Epstein and Ebert over here. Siskel and Epstein. American Dharma. Oh, is this? He was making a dumb joke because that's a Bannon movie. Movie about Bannon. Errol Morris's documentary about Bannon.
It's certain Bannon-esque qualities.
Okay. Anyway, I thought that was going to be some kind of actually interesting movie, but that doesn't look that interesting. All right. We went full on all night. Thank you guys. Everybody have a good night.